Phoenix lights. You remember in that experience, thousands of people witnessed not just lights in the sky, but the actual mile-long craft going over their homes. And a lot of those people described seeing lights just like that. There were these red glowing, almost lava-looking, where they weren't emitting beams of light. It was as if it was self-contained fire. If you're not familiar with Bob Lazar, he was a whistleblower working at a base near Area 51. And at that time, there was no pop culture related to Area 51. It wasn't in the minds of the masses because no one had ever heard of it. It was very classified. So he kind of blew the whistle on that whole story. So he's the reason we know about Area 51. They had several off-world extraterrestrial crafts stationed there that he actually worked on and worked to reverse engineer.
Pretty incredible claim.
Absolutely.
It's weird to think there's people that never have thought about this
Right,
stuff.
or they just think it's only crazy people that have experiences like that.
Oh yeah, totally. Like he's literally thinking like, oh, is he not well in the head?
Humanoids.
I'm not even sure what a humanoid is.
I mean, you got alien humanoids, reptilians, you got underground base humanoids, the flying humanoids.
There's a whole spectrum.
Remember you were telling me that? You're like, dude, I'm being downloaded.
Yeah, I would have these dreams, these intense, long dreams where I felt like I was connecting with some other intelligence.
You told me that you felt like they were like psychically training you and you're getting ready for like the ascension in 2012.
Yeah,
you know?
I did think that.
John the Savior just ascends in white robes.
Come with me, humans.
Conspiracy.
Synchronicity. Sasquatch.
Donald Trump.
Alien races. Satanism in Hollywood. MK Ultra.
Pleiadians.
Mandela effect.
Close the door, Ed.
Jeremy, close your door!
Snowflakes.
Inner Earth. Disagreements.
My lab.
JFK assassination.
Flat Earth.
Corey Feldman. Magicians are demons. Specters and spooks. Sleep paralysis. Muslim Islamicists. The gender spectrum. Yes. Alternative history. Shadow people.
Quiet, I'm trying to say words with the mouth.
Psilocybin. Sorcery. Poltergeist. Sulforaphane. Evolution. Is it real?
Skull and Bones. I would never talk about it. That's old. Y2K.
Cover-ups. The Oklahoma City bombing. Vampire.
Well, hello.
What is up?
What's happening?
Hey.
Brother John and Brother Jeremy, Brother Chris. You know, I was thinking about that. Do we need to like say? I think it's good to do introductions. Well, we're starting a new year.
I'm John.
I'm John Burgundy.
I'm John Burgundy. John, Jer, and Chris. And we will never use our last names until we're famous.
The Brothers Three. Until we are sure we're not going to get death threats.
Yeah, until we can support ourselves without normal jobs.
Right.
We can't. They can't look at our LinkedIn page as conspiracy brother theorists.
This guy believes in Bigfoot. Mm.
I actually had a run-in on.
No. What do you mean a run-in?
I was walking on the towpath the other day.
Uh-huh.
I was walking Jake, my dog, and I ran into someone from like I went to school with growing up, and I hadn't seen him in like 20 years, and I didn't recognize him. And he's like, John? And I was like, hi. And he was like, John. Oh.
We'll bleep it.
We'll
bleep
bleep
your
it
own
out.
name.
And
That's hilarious.
so he introduced who he was, and I was like, we had talked for a little bit, you know, and he was telling me about his life, and he was going through some stuff, and I kind of told him what was going on with me, and I was telling him about the show, you know.
Oh, cool.
And then I told him about my UFO story, and he was like, like he was like, okay, I'm talking to a crazy person right now.
Oh, did you read it in his eyes? Where his eyes?
I mean, he wasn't too bad, but I was like, you probably think I'm crazy right now, and I really don't care. Like,
Yeah.
this stuff is so natural to me at this point. Like, it's weird to think there's people that never have thought about this
right,
stuff.
or they just think it's only crazy people that have experiences like that. Like that was.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
He's like literally thinking, oh, is he not well in the head?
Right. Well, the weird thing is like even if you believe your own story, like that people take that as obviously like there's a mental illness going on there. You know, like when I had that out of body experience that I told on the show before, like I remember after that happened, like I didn't even want to tell my girlfriend because
you had a girlfriend.
Once I did. Once I started telling.
Were you eating taco sauce out of the bottle
Sass?
at that point in your life?
Well, that's what induced the out-of-body experience. The overload of Mexican herbs and spices just pushed you out of your body.
So yeah, the whole point is, it's weird talking about this stuff to some people.
Yeah.
Some people, we've been doing this for so long that it's second nature. But to a lot of people that don't think about it that much, it's like a weird, like a mental illness almost.
And I think it would probably
like, oh, I feel bad for him.
it probably catches people off guard too if it's someone you haven't, like you said, haven't seen like 20 years. Where it's like they're not expecting you to get into like the reality of extraterrestrial visitation.
He's like, I had some heart issues, and I'm like, I saw a UFO.
some
I have a
heart
family
issues.
of 4 and had some problems with my health, and I'm like, oh, well, I do a show on conspiracy theories and ghosts, and I did see a UFO 10 years ago, so that's my life, and I have a dog.
So our lives kind of
I have
equal
a dog
out.
with knees.
Did Jake?
Doggy knees.
Jake, was he okay with him?
Not too bad. I had to, like, when I shook my hand, he tried to jump.
Oh yeah.
Protect dogs.
Was there something you were going to mention before that, Jeremy?
Before your run-in
I had a
story?
run-in, and then, but I can't remember if we were talking about something else before that.
That you didn't want to die.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking that. Guys, I don't want to die.
We should talk about that.
Yeah.
Well, Chris brought up an interesting point about death.
Well, I think what makes me comforted in a strange way is that everybody does it.
Yeah, but that's also the uncomfortable thing about it, because you know it's going to happen.
No, but that's an interesting point. I always thought when I was a kid, this is going to sound really weird, but I used to think that idea like, well, everybody dies eventually. I always thought about Leonardo DiCaprio. I was like, Leo is going to die. And he's probably going to be there before I get there.
Why
'cause he's
Leonardo
older.
DiCaprio? It happened to
so
be the
famous.
age.
Yeah, he was just like so famous, and he
At
was
that
like
time?
At that time, he was like,
Like, God wouldn't take him.
Yeah, and if God takes him, like if I was on a plane with Leonardo DiCaprio, I'd feel okay because like he's going through it, then I
He's
can go through
insured
it.
for way too much money. He's not
Right.
dying. Like, someone will
That's
save
true.
him.
He's going to be.
Like, a paratrooper will come out of, like, space and
He's going to ride
grab
his
him.
dino duo.
Yeah, I wonder if he was able to purchase those dinosaurs. That's a reference to our last episode, if anybody hasn't tuned into the last one yet. Oh, speaking of the last episode, we did have a slight technical issue, and if you were one of the first 30 excited people to download it within the first hour, you might not have been able to get your app, especially if you were using CastBox, to finish playing the episode, and it might just get giving you an error.
So what you need to do is just, if you couldn't play the episode, just delete the app and reinstall it, and it should download correctly.
Yeah, sorry about that. Sometimes that happens
Delete
with
the app?
Yeah, you have to.
delete the
app.
It's
Really?
it's a bad
That's
bug with CastBox.
definitely not good.
Or you could listen to it on YouTube if you want to.
What I was going to say was, that's what I was going to say. So if you don't want to go through the hassle of re-downloading all your favorite shows and stuff, and you can listen on Spotify or YouTube or another podcast app.
But most times, if you delete your app, it saves the data. So if you have an account with the app, then you'll already have your
you're not gonna
podcasts
lose
there.
all
It doesn't do that for me. on
Well, that's because
CastBox.
you'd never bothered to actually make an account.
Oh, that's true. I'm always as a
Because you're
guest.
lazy.
Okay,
Chris, you are lazy.
that is
And a
that's
fence
highly
sitter.
subjective. I am
You are.
neither
most
lazy
things.
nor do I sit on fences.
You do. Metaphorically speaking.
Well, that's a conversation for another day because I disagree.
Speaking of conversations for the day, what are we going to be covering, Chris?
Yes. Oh, that's a good. We should probably mention what
This
we're
is
gonna-
episode 15, by the way.
Yes, it is.
Okay, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about Bob Lazar.
Bob Lazar. Yeah. So
Bob Lazar.
This is, I think, a good time to get into the Area 51 stuff because the recent Jeremy Corbell documentary came out covering Bob Lazar. And the interesting thing about Bob Lazar is, okay, so if you're not familiar with Bob Lazar, we were growing up, we were big fans because it was, I think, 89 when he came out. He was a whistleblower working at a base near Area 51. And at that time, there was no pop culture related to Area 51. It wasn't in the minds of the masses because no one had ever heard of it. It was very classified. So he kind of blew the whistle on that whole story.
Right. So he's the reason we know about Area 51.
Right,
And that
and
was
he-
from 89.
Right. And he's a very controversial figure in ufology because after he came out with this story, he went dark for 30 years, roughly. Because, and he will argue that the government put a lot of time and effort into
Destroying his credibility. Right?
exactly removing him from school logs at MIT, removing him from employment records at Los Alamos Air Force Base. So basically, he put his neck on the line, and he's a very antisocial guy, but he put his neck on the line, exposed this top secret base that was going on, and claimed that they had several off-world extraterrestrial crafts stationed there that he actually worked on and worked to reverse engineer.
Pretty incredible claim
Absolutely.
to say that you worked at this Air Force base, basically, and were in the presence of these ships that he had to reverse engineer.
Yeah.
I had no idea who he was until we watched the documentary
and
last night.
that's the thing, is like he would be still a huge name. I mean, he is a huge name in ufology for the diehard, flying saucer nuts. Like we were growing up with the weird pictures on our walls and stuff. But for a lot of people, you wouldn't know much about him because he did go dark for 30 years. but his legacy was extremely impactful in society because every movie and every book written about Area 51, fiction or research-based or whatever, was all because of Bob Lazar's announcement in '89. Right?
Yeah.
So that's mind-blowing. So any movie you've seen, what's the one with Will Smith, Welcome to Earth?
Welcome to Earth.
Independence Day,
yeah.
Area 51 plays heavy in that, X-Files, Area 50, like any
What do you want
sci-fi.
us to do?
Any, yeah.
So are we going to jump into that, or are we going to do the news first? And then
Yeah, I just wanted to, we
a
wanted
little
to,
teaser?
yeah, a little
Little preview.
idea of what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to play some clips of Bob Lazar discussing his involvement.
Yeah, and the reason it's timely, I think you briefly mentioned, it's timely because a documentary just came out. He kind of broke his silence again after 30 years.
Yeah.
In Jeremy Corbell's documentary called Bob Lazar, Area 51.
And Flying Saucers.
And Flying Saucers. So you should definitely check it out. We'll be quoting some stuff from there in the episode, dropping some clips from various sources, and I think you guys are going to dig it.
It's a great documentary with new information, and if you're someone who wanted to hear more about the Lazar story, I mean, it's really the only place you can go to get some really fascinating testimonials from Bob himself. So you
Right.
really get a feeling of who he
An
is.
inside look.
Okay.
Yeah,
Let's
so-
save the rest for later.
Cool.
Yeah.
You want to do the news?
Let's do the news.
I like how you switch it up. Like every few episodes, you'll do a different
News
you
stinger?
kind of go back between those two.
We should have done like a space one this time.
Oh,
Or like
that'll
an
be good.
alien one, like a creepier one.
That's very
If any of
victorious.
those- If any of those illustrate an alien newscast.
What is an alien newscast? All right, Chris, what is our news story for the day?
Okay, so I think you guys have both heard about this by now, but on New Year's Day, one of our spacecraft was able to investigate the furthest astral body we've ever been able to visit using the New Horizon probe. Did you hear about that? And it was 33 minutes after New Year's Day, midnight, so, 12:33.
Was it 12:33 for real?
Yeah.
33 minutes after New Year's? Mm-hmm. The Masonic number.
The Masonic number, yes.
It might be a hint that it is...
Well, it's interesting. So the occult stuff. So that's kind of what the story's about, and the controversy surrounding the naming of this thing. Okay, so this is the headline, John, from The Guardian. Ultima Thule. NASA defends name of distant space amid questions about Nazi connections. Nazi connections in NASA. Ultima Thule is an icy world floating in the Kuiper Belt at the edge of our solar system, and this week it became the most distant object to be explored by humanity. Scientists have already received stunning photos back from the New Horizons spacecraft and expect to make even deeper discovery in the coming months and years. So yeah, it's the furthest thing that we've ever been able to put our human eyeballs on.
Allegedly.
Jeremy, what do you think about this awesome news story?
We'll get to Jeremy's space doesn't exist thing after I read the story.
I'm just dropping in my allegedly comments, but keep going.
Yeah, okay. But during the discovery process, controversy has continued to rage over the name that NASA chose to give that faraway target. The phrase ultimate Thule is a Latin metaphor used historically to refer to those parts of the world so distant that they were unknown. As such, it has appeared on maps and in other places for centuries. So you guys know, like, here be dragons, little illustration of a dragon. You know what I'm talking about? On an old map, you always
Oh,
see
yeah.
like dragons. It's like, here be
There be
dragons.
there be
The other
dragons.
thing it will say often is Ultima Thule, because it's supposed to be like the edge of it, the known world.
Right.
So that's the reasoning for naming that, according to them. But in addition to those older uses, the word has been used by some Nazis to refer to the mystical land where the Aryan race began. The German Thule Society was an important contributor to the Nazis, and the phrase continues to be used by some neo-Nazi groups today. Now, the NASA mission's principal investigator, Alan Stern, has spoken out about the name and defended the decision to keep using it even after the connection became clear. I'm going to do it in a British accent. I'm going to try this. This
Please
might be
do.
awful.
Please do.
He's not British, by the way, but it'll distinguish the
quote.
quote. Okay. I sort of thought we might get that question. Damn it, John.
Too late. Was that British? Try again.
Let me get into it.
Okay. Yeah. Nestle in there. And you're British.
I sort of thought we... Stop. Now I'm in my head. Okay.
That must be uncomfortable.
It's real small in there.
It's a tight spot next to my giant brain. I sort of thought we might get that question, he said when reporters pressed him on the issue. I've said it a number of times. I think New Horizons is an example, one of the best examples in our time, of raw exploration. And the term ultimate Thule, which is very old, many centuries old, possibly over 1,000 years old, is a wonderful name for exploration.
Are you in the
he said.
Shire?
I know. I feel like I'm going into like New York gangster. That's why we chose it. I would say that just because some bad guys once liked that term, we're not going to let them hijack it.
Sorry, listeners.
Sorry, I
Okay.
extremely
I thought
apologize.
that made it harder to understand.
I extremely apologize.
extremely apologize for mouth words I'm using with my face.
For everyone that's still here listening, or
Yeah,
not
how
clicked
many
away,
people just fast forwarded through that part?
There's like one guy who's like, I really like his accent.
Yeah, that was okay. I didn't practice it, so maybe I should practice it. Okay, so what is interesting to me though is the that quote at the end there where he says, "That's why we chose it." I would say that just because some bad guys once liked that term, we're not going to let them hijack it. But it's funny because NASA was hijacked by Nazis. So
That's
there's
right.
irony
There's a
there.
turnaround there.
Right. I mean, there was
Project Paperclip.
There's open. Yeah. I mean, it's open now that it's been declassified. The Project Paperclip. We grabbed the best.
Operation Paperclip, isn't it?
Yeah, Operation Paperclip. What did I say? Project.
Either way.
Either way, tomato, tomato. But we know that, NASA was built on the shoulders of Nazis that we brought from Nazi Germany.
That's a
Von
whole
Braun.
nother Yeah,
Yeah.
for anyone that doesn't know, we did, after the war was ended, we brought a whole bunch of Nazi scientists over to the United States, right?
Right, yeah.
And other people too, I think.
So
right?
the naming of this is that it's a mystical Nazi land.
Right. I mean,
Like
it's
that
just
they're carrying that through.
another thing you can point to. That's why you have all those goofy movies about Nazi bases on the moon. It's because, the underlying reasoning for that is because the history of Nazi,
Movies with Goofy?
not goofy dog movies, but
Like Goofy Fights the Reich?
you know what, Goofy Fights the Reich.
Propaganda film?
But yeah, okay, so I thought that was interesting. Also, the name is only temporary and the object will be given a permanent one by the International Astronomical Union.
So that was the temporary name.
Yeah. It's still the name now, but I mean,
It's an occult, what do they call that? When you signal? It's like a cult
dog whistle?
Yeah, signaling. Like a
dog whistle.
It's a little wink to those in the know.
Yeah, a little nod, a little wink.
Touch of the nose.
But yeah, anyway, I thought that was an interesting article, and I thought the Nazi stuff,
That connection.
the connection.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that's definitely relevant.
But I will say, it makes total sense that we also use that term because they're literally at the edge of our known
Right.
solar system in discovery. So if they named it something that
Allegedly at the edge of our known system.
All right, there we go.
Part of the
So-
story that they're feeding us. If we
have
trust NASA.
we've poked Jeremy's flat Earth tum tum.
Well, it's interesting. I was listening.
I've fallen and I can't get up.
Who was that?
Where is that from? Wasn't that Urkel's line?
Well, yeah.
That wasn't Urkel though, was
no.
it?
Oh, maybe.
That was Urkel's line.
That's from the old Lifelight commercial.
Wow, they took
Oh, wow.
the
And I
Stephen
can't
Urkel
get
line.
up.
That's really sad.
All right, Jeremy, well, tell us.
Oh no, I was just going to say. Interestingly, there was a joint story that came out at around the same time, which was about the Chinese landing on the dark side of the moon.
Oh, yeah, that
the
happened.
backside.
So yeah,
right?
this new year is big for space. Space first. So yeah, China landed their first
Allegedly.
moon probe on the dark side of the moon.
Right, allegedly. So this is what was interesting. I was listening to Ground Zero with Clive Lewis, and they were discussing this. And John, there's a clip that's relevant if you want to drop it. It's called Hoagland Program 1. But this clip is interesting because we're talking about the allegedness of it. And we always go back and talk about the problem with NASA and all the space agencies around the world and why it's an issue if you want to debate what's actually happening in space, if there is space. Like everything that's coming from space agencies, well, we have all these space agencies around the world and
Right.
they can't all be lying, or if it would be really hard for them to all organize. I just thought this was interesting because Richard Hoagland was on Clive Lewis, who is obviously a huge proponent of space being real, but his focus is obviously
I'm a proponent of space being real.
someday that's
I
going to
should
be a
have told
thing.
the man on the towpath that space isn't real. That'd have really blown his mind.
But yeah, so he's always for those of you who don't know Richard C. Hoagland, he's famous for a lot of structures on Mars, structures on the moon. He's written a lot of books. He worked with.
He was I think he was the very first news correspondent to be involved.
Preeminent.
Yes.
To be involved in the NASA missions in the 60s.
Right.
He had
worked
behind
for
the scenes
CBS, I
access.
think.
Yeah, something like that.
Anyways,
we
long
go.
story short, but this is an interesting clip, and I'll tell you why. Roll it.
Now, because it's 2019 and NASA just flown by a damn spaceship, the Chinese landed within hours of that event. You don't think these things are coordinated? You don't realize there's only one space program for the entire planet.
Okay, so yeah. So I just thought it was interesting that he was pointing out someone who is a proponent of all these kind of space theories or conspiracies about all the mysterious stuff going on in space, but he also believes that all the information we're getting is from a single global space program.
That's
it's
interesting.
not just NASA.
That's interesting because if you want to talk about any of your flat Earth theories, it almost
Right.
or the fact that we didn't go to the moon,
Or
all these
NASA's
other sort
lying
of-
and the- yeah.
right. That's the only way it could really work. I would feel
if they're all under one roof. And that was my argument from the beginning, when we talked about in the very first episode, which was a highly heated episode, but popular, probably because we were fighting on it. But
We need to do another one of those.
I do want to do, so yeah, we won't get into this now, but I would like to do another episode revisiting like our flat Earth, space debate that we always have.
That'd be fun to do.
Yeah.
But I do think, it makes sense that the initial development of these individual space programs around the world would have to kind of piggyback off each other because it's such a new technology. But let's assume space is real, Jeremy, for a second. If you can
Make that leap.
put that in your head.
Okay. I'll go back to when I was a child.
We get to the point where space travel becomes so easy in comparison to how it used to be. I can see if there is one kind of global space program, and see countries splintering off and just doing their own thing again, and maybe we have Star Wars.
Well, that's the thing is right now it's under the auspices of everyone having their own space program. And Hoagland's argument is that it's not really, it's all coordinated.
I feel like we should have had that. We've been hearing forever that there is going to be these like people that you could pay to go to space sort of
Yeah, you
projects.
hear that since the 60s.
Well, they have it. We're going on right now.
No.
Not yet.
Well, they're working on.
It's always ahead, though. It's always, give us your money now,
It's
or
like climate change sort of thing.
book a
It's always
ticket.
like 10 years down the road.
Right.
10
So-
years down the road. 10
Right.
years down the road. 20 years down the road. But yeah, I mean, how long is like Richard Branson and what's his face?
Elon Musk.
Tony Stark.
Elon Musk.
Tony Stark. I mean, Elon Musk, how old is he? I mean, he's only been doing the SpaceX things, it's 5 years, 6 years maybe? Like where it's been like a.
Yeah, I think John's just
functional-
arguing that it's a trend. This is what always
I
happens.
feel like we started to hear like you could pay to go to space, like, I don't know, 10, 15
Well,
years ago.
they've had civilians pay to go at this point, but not, you're right, not like on a luxury resort spacecraft.
Well, no
Like,
one's gone yet either, right?
Yeah. There's been civilians that have gone. A couple,
What?
I'm pretty
Is that
sure.
sure?
I don't think so, dude.
I'm pretty sure. We need a Googling producer in here to just Google things.
Jamie? Oh, that's right. Wrong podcast.
That's a different show.
Are you sure?
I'm pretty
that
sure.
Citizens have gone to space.
I know that
pretty
like
sure,
they
yeah.
were selling tickets
I know
to
you can-
multimillionaires.
Like as a guest, obviously. Like you
And it
can
wouldn't
get
be
on
that's never
space. It would be
happened
like,
yet.
I don't think that that's happened yet,
All right.
but I don't know.
Give me a computer
if you
device.
If you guys out there know about this, call in.
Like
let
a
us know.
billionaire is already just a regular citizen.
or like a
I think we would have
charity
heard
giveaway
like
or
first
something.
just regular citizen in space.
They would
sort
take a
of thing.
picture.
Yeah,
it
but-
would have been on Instagram.
Hold on a second. But why in the world would you think that you would hear about one specific space story out of all those news stories
Because
that we miss on
the
a daily
first,
basis?
like just regular citizen going to a moon
Yeah.
would be kind of a big deal.
Not the moon.
I mean, into space.
Yeah.
Low Earth orbit.
But I'm pretty sure I read that headline before.
Okay.
I'll look it up.
Anyways, well, let's continue on while Chris is looking
Yeah,
up.
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, guys.
Do we want to get into the Bob Lazar?
Were you done with your talk on
Yeah, I just
your
wanted to-
space denial? You freak.
Oh no, I just wanted to touch on that because I thought it was interesting. Don't call me a freak.
I'm just joking.
Well, let's take a break so that we can get into the actual content.
Yeah, people want the meat.
Wait, before we go to break, did you want to?
Oh, and do some quick thank yous.
Yeah, new patrons and some donors we want to give a shout out to before we go to our break.
Oh, yeah. Abby?
Abby,
Abby, thank you. Oh, that warmed my
wow,
heart.
that's the best thank you we've given a patron.
We're
yet.
making stingers for as thank you gifts.
Yes. Now, if you donate on Patreon, we
You get 1,000 John voices thanking you in
We'll
1,000
make
different
you
ways.
a personalized stinger. Tell me something about yourself. in
Yeah,
more
give us a little
personal.
bit of information, and we will create a little audio stinger for you. And thank you live on the show for all the subscribers.
All right, our next new patron is Brad P.
Oh,
Good dude.
Hey, Brad! It's John! I'm up on this hill! We just want to say thank you for being a Patreon! That was really cool, man. Thanks a lot.
that was great.
I ran up on a hill.
I
to
like
do
it.
that.
That's
I heard
very
that.
good.
Yeah, I was down at the bottom with the microphone.
No, you weren't.
I wasn't there.
I did it all by myself.
Were you really on a hill? Mm-hmm. What?
Yeah, I went
I
to
just
the
thought you-
back of the edge of the field.
I thought you just did
Wow.
a design.
I thought you just
No.
added a reverb.
No, that was I
you
literally
went for it for Brad.
Really, really set the microphone up and I ran all the way to the top of the hill and screamed it.
That's
and everyone
amazing.
heard me.
Wow.
That's so authentic.
Well, for
I
any,
like that.
any listeners out there that are not quite set up to do the patron thing yet,
If you go to
that-
our website, you can either click Patreon button at the top or you can click PayPal. PayPal, you can give a direct donation, but Patreon, you can sign up for a monthly subscription or a donation.
Extra content.
You get extra content.
every month.
And you get to support a good cause because we are trying to make a go of this thing. And we
Right.
need your support.
Want to keep
people.
doing it for
We
you.
love talking about weird stuff. Anyway, thank you, Benji. Benji S.
So much. The
What
missing-
a beautiful man.
Missing brother.
As the horses gallop away.
They
That's
gallop
great.
away. We carry Ben away into the sunset.
Good job, John.
Thank you.
Those are beautiful.
Very strange.
So thank you
but
guys. It means a lot.
just like our podcast.
Each of you three are beautiful heartwarmers for us.
Thank you very much for helping us grow the show.
Yeah, the encouragement means a lot.
Oh, we had one quick message before.
Yeah, last thing before we go to break, I just wanted to read a quick fan mail from Kimberly. Thank you. You guys, every time you write in, it really helps us stay motivated. And for anybody we haven't read messages before, sorry, but from now on we will be reading your messages on the air. And feel free to call in as well. This is from Kimberly. Quote, loving the podcast, guys, ! Smiley face. I would love to hear humanoids covered.
You hear what covered?
Humanoids.
Humanoids.
Yes.
I'm not even sure what a humanoid is.
Yeah, Jerry, you want to take this
A
one?
humanoid is anything resembling a human form, but not actually being a human. So that's what I actually followed up and said, Kimberly, if you're listening, what specific kind of humanoid would you like covered? Because you got alien humanoids, reptilians, you got Wendigo, you got cryptids that are
She might want a
humanoid-esque.
breakdown of
Yeah, I guess we could give some humanoid options.
That's an awful lot to just
That's
ask.
a lot of humanoids.
That's an awful
Well,
lot.
you know what's
I'd like a thorough breakdown.
I think the most
Each and every humanoid that exists.
I think the most common, when I hear about humanoids, I always think of like the big phenomenon in South America, Mexico,
Oh,
of, like,
flying
the
humanoid.
flying humanoids,
Right.
where they're like little guys that are just flying around in the sky.
Little guys.
And then there's
guys.
underground base humanoids. Yeah, we'll have to wait till she gets back, but we will definitely be covering more of that stuff.
Yeah, so guys, send in your topics. Send in, compliments are always delicious.
Leave us a speak pipe on our website.
Subscribe, like our show, leave comments, go to iTunes and write us a killer review.
It really does help.
And share this shit, share that shit, and also like us, and also subscribe, and also
All those things. Yes.
share it.
Anyway, yes, sure,
seriously.
absolutely. And stick around after the break because John, your very own John at Beliefful, is going to be telling his close encounter of
I'm going to tell you how I got interested in this stuff.
All right, stick around.
And we're back.
Ooh, we are.
Back.
Welcome.
Thanks for coming back, guys.
Yeah, hopefully you came back
appreciate it.
after Chris's terrible impressions.
You know, I do them
You
well when I'm
know.
alone.
Yeah, when you're on the microphone.
I do
with us
everything better
staring at
alone.
You got one good
It's the
laugh in
worst
there.
sympathy laugh.
Okay, so I'm going to play my UFO encounter that I pre-recorded.
I'm
I
excited.
love how transparent we are.
Let's
Ready?
hear your story, Jonathan.
So this story takes place about 12 years ago. I had recently moved from Seattle to the city of Austin, Texas, and had just been on a long cross-country trip from Seattle to Texas with my good friend, and it was a pretty adventurous journey, some danger, some really bad weather, so I was in kind of like a place of heightened emotion already. I was in a new city, I was trying to figure out my surroundings, and on top of all that, I had just discovered 6 months prior the viewing of Zeitgeist, which is a documentary film that sort of can change the way you look at reality. It makes you realize that not everything is what you think it is as far as government and even religion. And so I was in a state of high receptiveness to new ideas, I remember, but I was also really vulnerable, I felt at the time. So being in this new city and not sure if I had made the right decision created sort of an interesting dynamic in my emotions as I was starting to explore the city. And I remember it was really hot and humid living in Texas, so a lot of steamy, kind of muggy nights. It was, I believe, late June or mid-June, and I remember that school had been out for a couple weeks, and it was just dead. It was dead quiet. I mean, compared to what it had been a month before, like students everywhere. You know, we lived right on the border, so it was a very overwhelming place to live, but also really exciting. I remember I was doing long bike rides, kind of weaving in and out of the university dimly lit city streets, that sort of summertime smell. And I was really just starting to contemplate my life and a lot of the things I had just been through moving from Seattle and trying to figure out where I was going. So I was really enjoying myself, cruising up and down these streets and thinking about everything. And I remember it was one night, particular night I was out. It was a starry night, completely clear skies, and I had come down this hill where the stadium is, and it's a massive stadium, huge stadium, big university, and I stopped in front of the stadium, and they were performing a lot of construction on it at this point. They were expanding like these giant columns on the outer edges. And at that time, I just started to get into InfoWars, Alex Jones a little bit, and he was talking a lot about FEMA camps and sort of martial law. And my thoughts were, as I'm looking at this university, it looks like a prison. I remember thinking that at the time, kind of staring at it, at this overwhelming megalithic structure, and just kind of contemplating where our country's heading, where my life is heading. And all of a sudden, about probably 1,500 to 2,000 feet above where I'm staring at, this 3-lighted triangle appears in the sky. And at first I thought it was like a reflection on a crane. I thought it was like some sort of weird optical illusion from some glass reflecting high in the air. The first thing I noticed about it was that it was a triangle, and it had these 3 lights on the outer edges of the triangle, and they were pulsating. They looked like they were almost on fire, the way that fire kind of moves and has that pulsating sort of, fire from a distance. It was very odd. And after about, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 seconds of staring at it, I realized that was when, I've never had that feeling before, when you realize you're witnessing something that doesn't fit into your programmed, conditioned mind. Right as I realized that, my mind starts spinning, like what could this possibly be? It starts shooting across the sky. And when I mean shooting, I mean like defying the laws of physics. It had to be moving at hundreds of miles a second. And it was moving like an insect moves, like a mosquito moves. That's how I always describe it to people. It's like when you see a mosquito and you catch it out of your eye 1 second, and all of a sudden it's somewhere else. And like you lose sight of it for a second, it's all the way it's somewhere else. And it was like that, looking up into the sky. And I must have stared at it for probably about 15 to 20 seconds before I realized that this was way out of my comfort zone, and it kind of just shattered my paradigm in that moment. And I freaked out, and I jumped on my bike, and I just pedaled as hard as I could in the opposite direction. It was this sort of like excitement, but also complete terror, not knowing what I had just seen. And I stopped, I don't know, about probably 30 seconds later, and looked back, and it was gone. And, after that point, I was a pretty changed person. Like that was the experience that started to shape where I'm at now with you guys, what we're doing. And my life never went back to normal after that. With the combination of the Zeitgeist movie and that, it was just like I sort of went down a series of long rabbit holes that I'm still in. And yeah, it was one of those life-changing, life-altering moments that sort of changed my destiny. And yeah, fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I've always wanted to see something like that.
Did you were alone when that happened, right?
Yeah, it was like
middle of the
2:30
night.
in the morning.
Yeah,
Like
so
completely alone. There's no one out.
I totally understand why you would be like, initially when
Terrified.
you took off on your bike, you're like, because it's yes, the fact that like it's something completely outside your known reality. So it's scary, but then also the fact that there's no one around. It's the middle of the night. And the other thing that freaks me out is it's as if you're looking up at this thing, realizing that this is nothing you can describe from your life experience, and your mind starts tumbling, trying to figure out what it is. And right as you start doing that, then it starts to zip around as if it's like, oh, you're looking at me, look at this, bang, bang, bang,
That's
bang.
how it felt. It seriously felt like it knew I was looking at it.
You hear
There's
that a lot.
an awareness.
Like there was an awareness to it that like it was meant for me in that moment to see. That was probably the freakiest part about it.
Yeah.
Is like I made that connection emotionally.
And it
Like,
responded.
yeah, and I was just like, that's when it freaked me
You
out.
hear that
It's
all the
just like,
time.
John.
You hear that all the time in a lot of these encounters where it's even when it's just lights in the sky, where it's like once you take notice and it almost responds to the way that your mind is thinking, and then will act accordingly.
Yeah.
It really, I mean, I remember the first couple weeks after that was really exciting, and it really felt like a whole new world. Like it was exciting.
given
in
a
way.
glimpse.
Yeah, and it was like I just couldn't believe. It was almost like I was high for that long.
Yeah.
But then like the next couple of years, I was like obsessed with trying to see another one.
Yeah.
Like I was obsessed with it. Like I would like just stare at the sky forever, like looking for another, because it just plagued my mind forever. And I went down all
You
these
needed to see it again.
rabbit holes of like trying to figure out like. I thought I had these like I thought I'd been chipped possibly. It was a
Remember you were
weird.
telling me that you're like, dude, I'm being downloaded. I have information.
Oh, that's true. I forgot about that part. Yeah, I would have these dreams, these intense, long dreams where I felt like I was connecting with some other intelligence. And they would,
Downloading
like,
information.
Downloading information. I mean, that really did happen. I mean, I don't, obviously I can't prove that.
You felt like they were, you told me that at that time that you felt like they were training you. And you were like psychically training you,
Yeah,
and you're getting
like-
ready for like the ascension in 2012.
Yeah, I did think that.
Oh, John the Savior just ascends in white robes. Come with me, humans.
No, I didn't think that, but I definitely felt like there was information. I mean, like I was really in it at the time, and it was
Yeah.
kind of crazy. But looking at it now, it definitely like shaped me into like what's going on in the world today. Like it kind of did prepare me for, I think, what's coming in a way.
for
like,
accepting some crazy notions.
Well, that, yeah, and we're in a very chaotic state in the planet, and it's going to get way worse too. Like we're not getting out of this time without some serious issues that are about to come up. And I do think going through some of that stuff, I think a lot of other people have gone through it too. It kind of prepares you, and I mean, you guys have gone through your own stuff too. Like even talking about this openly, it's preparing us for if there is some, there seems to be these gateways that are opening up. It seems like everying's starting
Disclosure,
to manifest.
if you want to get into the
Disclosure, political
Right.
issues, government stuff,
A lot of
country
turmoil.
fallout, a lot of turmoil.
Well, I think a lot of people listening to the show are people who've had their mind open one instance or another, whether it was something amazing like your encounter, or whether it was just watching an amazing
Saw a really good
documentary.
documentary.
But it started them down a path that we've all been down. Like I think, unless it's someone tuning in, maybe they're just hoping we're talking about ghosts today. Sorry, it's not an episode on that. We'll get back to that. But I think the majority of subscribers enjoy the range of topics, and I think it's because their minds have already been opened.
Yeah.
And that's why
All this
that's
stuff
why they come back.
connects.
They're looking
you know.
for the belief hole, man.
What I thought was interesting about your story was the terror and the loss of logic. I mean, what are you going to do in that situation? But I just think about like you're seeing these things defy the laws of physics, zipping around at light speeds or beyond, and you're going to get away by riding your bicycle down the road. I just picture you like riding it, and then they come down and just like
Is it 12
just like
speed?
slowly following at 10 miles per hour.
I was thinking about it again later, and it's like, it almost seems like the way it was moving, it's almost like it was coming in and out of different realities.
Oh,
Like,
dimensions.
Like I said, it didn't seem like it wasn't like you could see a trail like of it moving. It was
Right.
like
It was-
literally
it was
blinking
there
in
and
and
then
out
Blinking
of-
in and out.
and then it's
Yeah.
somewhere else.
That
yeah.
was the weirdest part about how it
Could be
moved.
post-dimensional.
And we'll talk about when we get into the Bob Lazar stuff today.
Oh, his
how he-
explanation of how the crafts might move, how it works.
I don't know if it exactly makes the same sense because I mean I was thinking more about like how it's almost like
blipping in and
Have
out.
you ever heard of that theory about how space travel works? Where you can take
fold
a page,
space-time.
Yeah, like if you think about a piece of paper flat and there's like 2 points on each end, and you fold it in half, and it like the points meet together. Like
right.
that's
You just
kinda
step
how
over.
it
It's the
moves.
Einstein-Rosen bridge.
Yeah, the wormhole theory. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and it seemed like it was moving like that. Like there was no time lapse between where it was moving.
Yeah. It appears as if it's almost teleportation, but but the theory is behind it is that it's folding space-time. So one moment it's here, and then in the very next moment it's there.
And that's what's interesting. So we're going to get into Bob Lazar and his description of how this craft operates and how the engine actually works. And he talks about the manipulation of space-time, but instead of folding space-time so you can have those jumps, which might be a possibility, he talked about the distortion of space-time, right? I think we might have a clip of that, but it's the idea where the craft actually distorts space-time in front of the craft. in any path it wanted to go. And what that would do, his analogy was laying a bowling ball. There's a bowling ball on a bed, and you press your hand down in front of the bowling ball to distort the matter around it so the bowling ball falls forward into your space. And that's the idea of how those engines work.
So
the
instead
engines
of-
that he back engineered.
Right, and the idea is that it's the first craft we've ever seen that instead of taking something in and pushing it out, shooting out behind it, that kind of propulsion, this actually changed the space-time in front of it to allow it to fall through space.
Fall forward. Yeah.
Yeah, crazy stuff.
Yeah.
One more thing I wanted to say about your experience, John, that light situation where you said it was almost like fire. It was almost like the way it moved, it wasn't like typical lights. It was sort of an undulating sort of lava look. And that's so typical for sightings, specifically the triangular 3-lit craft, like the Delta sort of configuration.
Or like the lights undulate kind
Right,
of. And
Phoenix Lights. You remember that's the huge story, Phoenix Lights. In that experience, thousands of people witnessed not just lights in the sky, but the actual mile-long craft going over their homes. And a lot of those people described seeing lights just like that. There were these red glowing, almost lava-looking, where they weren't emitting beams of light. It was as if it was self-contained fire, plasma, magma.
That's
energy.
how and that's the weird commonality. I wonder if that's sort of like like some energy form or something.
Yeah, I mean, it makes total sense. And like, you know,
I think it's probably flashlights so they can see the space below them.
when we get into Bob Lazar stuff,
Probably.
like it's good to keep in mind, like he's only referring to the 9 craft that were at his facility in 1989, this typical saucers type craft. But that's obviously not to say that there's the potential to have many different types of craft. And the triangle one with the 3...
This is just what he was exposed to.
Right, so it's a separate thing. So so even if he's correct on how those saucers moved with their propulsion system with the gravity waves, it might be completely different from whatever civilization is visiting us in these triangular crafts with these red lights. Maybe those red lights have to do with the actual navigation or propulsion systems.
Right, or it's also completely possible that the triangular craft that a lot of people talk about are actually potentially military with back-engineered technology or advanced technology that they got from somewhere or developed from somewhere, and we're just way behind it.
Right, and that's
so it looks alien to us.
It's definitely a big argument for sure.
Right.
I have that clip where he talks about a little bit about the science and what it would be like if, we brought a nuclear reactor back to Victorian times.
Okay, yeah.
And I think it might actually even briefly touch upon what we talked about before, how it bends the space in front.
Okay.
Transporting a small modern-day portable nuclear reactor back into Victorian times and giving it to the scientists there. Well, back in that time, they didn't even know about radiation. So they'd see a machine making power, kind of like what we're doing, and marvel at it. Wow, it's producing a lot of power. There's no smokestack, there's no coal, there's no fuel. How is this thing working? And they start taking it apart. Well, they'll all die as soon as they get close to the core. People that come in to check on them will all die. And no one knows, nothing touched them, so they're going to think it's haunted or something. There's some evil forces or something in there. But, who says that can't happen to us? The first time Barry showed me the reactor in operation, here it is on the bench, and he said, try and touch the sphere on top. And you couldn't, your hand was pushed away. Just like, 2 light poles of a magnet. It's the exact same feeling, but there was no metal involved. And that's shocking. That's really shocking because nothing does that. That's an operating, powerful force field. So just seeing something like that immediately starts that whole chain reaction in your mind going, wow, wait, if you can do this, there can be force fields on tanks. There can be things that lift off the ground. We don't need jet and rocket engines anymore. That means there's no use for cars. Boom, the whole thing changes. The entire world, the economy, everything would go end on end just if we had an answer to how that machine worked that I was sitting there touching. Life somewhere else. It's a big deal. It's an important part of human history that we found that out. It was awesome, but fearsome at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's what's interesting. We'll go to break here in a second.
And that's a clip from Corbell's documentary, Bob Lazar.
Great film. Check it out. Definitely worth the watch.
Yeah.
Especially for someone that's so was deeply tied. And he's obviously a brilliant person.
Right, and been so shrouded in mystery for the past 30 years since he broke the story. You know?
But what was interesting about that clip too, it reminds me of, we've talked a lot about free energy and how there's
suppressed
and
technologies.
we're still stuck on things like, like we wanted to go to solar and stuff like this, which is great, but it's not, first of all, it's not nearly enough to power what Like this, I'm getting into
It's a
something
very weak
else.
energy.
It's a weak energy, and we're going to end up going backwards in time. Like it'll destroy a lot of things if we try to put our whole economy on solar and wind. Like we can't power it. We'll end up going.
Well, yeah.
There will be a lot of people that suffer.
Yeah, and exactly, because there's not enough output yet for that technology. And this is the
Right,
thing
well,
too.
they're
is-
working on the
This is the
technology.
thing too. Is we're working on this technology. It's this quote,
we have.
That's the thing. It's this quote futuristic green technology that's all it's renewable. It's of the future. But in reality, if you believe any of the whistleblowers that have come out with a lot of this stuff, we have advanced technology now that blows us out of the water, 0-point energy, things that require no input to have output, a lot of things that can be explored that have been explored but have been suppressed on record. But we're focusing on solar.
Right, and not only through like Tesla's work, if you've heard the stories about Tesla and his 0-point energy and his ability to do those sorts of things, but also exactly what we're talking about today with the reverse engineering of alien technology. We've discovered this stuff, and if you're right, if you believe any of the whistleblowers, which there's plenty of evidence to suggest that they are telling the truth.
You guys got to watch this documentary, because when you hear Bob Lazar in this clip and when he's talking, when you can see him talking, this isn't a guy who's trying to come up with a story. This is a guy who's reacting to
He's
something.
a rocket scientist.
Yeah, but the authenticity of him reacting to the experience,
Yeah.
he gets so
You can tell they're
impassioned and
real
excited.
memories.
Yeah, they're absolutely real.
Yeah, this guy's
memories.
not just some fraud like that they, some crackpot. When they film him at his home, he has laboratories. He's well educated. He's been experimenting with this stuff his whole life. The guy is a seriously intellectual guy. He's not just some crazy dude.
Right.
Let's take a break real quick.
Let's go break. When we come back, we're gonna get deeper into Bob Lazar, his history, the claims he's made about what he's done, and also we'll eventually get to some of the detractors and why they say he's a fraud.
And we'll play some more clips.
Stick around.
And we're back.
And we're back.
Welcome.
Okay, we're going to get deep into Bob Lazar.
All right, we're going to play a kind of an intro clip.
This is when he first was introduced to the world by George Knapp.
Despite numerous inquiries and feelers, Dennis has remained anonymous until now. His real name is Robert Lazar, a young scientist with eclectic interests. The choice of Dennis was an inside joke. He says that's the name of his superior at Groom Lake. It wasn't a joke to Dennis.
He called right after and he said, "Do you have any idea what we're going to do to you now?" And I said, "Well, no." He hung up the phone.
Lazar's story is by any standards fantastic. He says he's telling it in order to protect himself. He says he was hired to work at an area called S4, which is a few miles south of Groom Lake. At S4, he says, are flying saucers, antimatter reactors, and other working examples of technology that is seemingly beyond human capabilities.
Thank you, George. It's so good to hear him again. We had clips of him from the last episode with Skinwalker Ranch. He's always
Did
in
he
the know.
die?
No, he's
No,
still alive.
okay, that's what I
He
thought.
hosts Coast to Coast.
a lot of the time.
Art
yeah.
Bell died, right?
Art Bell died, and then George Knapp and George Clooney both kind of...
George Clooney?
George Norrie, wow.
George Norrie.
Similar in appearance,
George
but
Snorri.
Yeah, they look exactly
the
like.
mustache, that's what
But
it is.
yes, I thought that clip was interesting because that's the very first time anyone's ever heard of Bob Lazar or Area 51.
Right.
And mentioning S4. And it also goes to the point of why he came out, which is to protect himself because he had threats on his life. So he introduced himself to the world and said, "This is what I have to say." And if he was to be killed, it would add credibility to his story. So it ensures his longevity in that way.
Right.
So you have a little breakdown.
I do, but
Further
it's I
breakdown
mean, I
it.
feel like all this information in this paragraph has been covered by everything we've said and also that clip. But I will read it real quick.
You can do an accent again?
I'm not going to do an accent again.
Thank you.
He's always responsible.
Just do something ridiculous.
Like a Cockney. Lazar is responsible for bringing the secret test site Area 51 to the attention of the general public, which we've already discussed. In May 1989, Lazar appeared in a special interview with investigative George Knapp on Las Vegas TV station KLAS under the pseudonym Dennis, and with his face hidden to discuss his reported employment at S4, a subsidiary facility he claimed existed near United States Air Force facility Area 51. And that was the clip we just heard. He said the facility was adjacent to Papoose Lake, which is located south of the main Area 51 facility at Groom Lake, which we camped out at. Do you remember that? That was fun. I was heavy. And included...
I have a great video on
me
YouTube.
waking up in the desert next to Area 51 where I'm just like this giant blob of sadness.
We'll put it on our Patreon. And
That's not going on the Patreon. It's on YouTube, though, so if you're a good investigator,
hilarious.
you can find me rolling out of a tent.
It is so funny, dude, because it's just me kind of filming this like broken down windmill in the Nevada desert, walking around this crazy crater we camped out in. And then I go to the tent and I unzip the tent and I look at Chris and Chris looks over and just goes, "What are you doing?" And rolls back over because he's hungover.
I was not healthy then.
And he was not healthy.
I have stages of unhealthiness in my life. You always pinpointed by weight gain.
You did look like a stuffed sausage.
I did. It was
in that
bad.
video. You're so much better now.
Anyway, continuing on.
Is that the food timer, Chris?
So, I'm okay.
Chris is a beautiful man, and he's
I
an
am
eligible
now.
bachelor.
I am.
And any girl interested,
Oh my God.
right into the Belief Hole.
I'm going home.
We should do a bachelor episode of Belief Hole.
He said the facility was adjacent to Papoose Lake, which is located south of main
Papoose.
Area 51 facility at Groom Lake, and included concealed aircraft hangars built into a mountainside. He said that he was involved in the reverse engineering of several flying saucers. He appeared under his own name and unmasked a subsequent interview with Knapp in November. That's when he came out and said, "I'm Bob Lazar. Here's my work history," and that kind of stuff. And then I was going to say that's where we could play the clip of Dennis, but do we need to if John already played that other one?
No, I have another clip of like where he's actually being interviewed by that news station.
John, why don't you play the clip and we'll see how it fares.
I will do that right now.
Exactly what's going on up there?
Well, there's several, actually 9 flying saucers, flying discs, that are out there of extraterrestrial origin, and they're being test flown and basically just analyzed.
You say there's 9 saucers. How are those tests going?
As far as what?
As far as whether they're successful and that sort of thing.
Oh, well, some of them are 100% intact and operate perfectly. The other ones are being taken apart. I was involved mainly in propulsion and the power source.
Where did we get these saucers? How did they come into the hands of the government?
I haven't the slightest idea, and you have to understand the information is very compartmentalized, and I was only allowed information that pertained particularly to what I was involved in.
But I mean, couldn't our government have made them as opposed to getting them from some alien beings?
Totally impossible. The propulsion system is a gravity propulsion system. The power source is an antimatter reactor. This technology does not exist at all. In fact, one of the reasons that I'm going forward with this information, it's not only a crime against the American people, it's a crime against the scientific community, which I've been part of for some time. We're actively trying to duplicate these systems, yet they are in existence now and basically in the hands of the government.
Preach it, Bob.
What would happen to you if the government learned that you were giving us this information?
Anything could happen. I don't know. I haven't the slightest idea.
Well, you said you referred to getting into trouble. Have you had some repercussions already?
Yeah, I've been threatened with being charged with espionage. I've had my life threatened by them, my wife's life threatened by them, and I mean, I don't know where else you can go from there.
Well, we want to thank you for joining us. It's pretty interesting stuff you've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And it's interesting, too, because in the documentary, he points out that his car was shot at. They blew out his tire. Since then, he's been raided. His lab's been raided. His home is, I think, was his home raided?
Multiple times, right?
Multiple times.
FBI.
You know.
Well, he said he's been raided by like everything, like the FDA, the NRA, or not the NRA.
NRA. Buy more guns.
FDA, like he said, a whole bunch of agencies that have no relevance to like, you know, specifically what he's been
Almost sounds like harassment, really, and threats.
But he did say though that he thinks that they're after something specific. He thinks that
it's the fuel,
isn't it? Though, what is it?
Element
115.
Element 115.
Stabilized element 115.
I have a clip of that.
Okay, so did he get into that at the end of the documentary to talk about that he may actually have some element 115?
Well, yeah,
was
that's
able to
the thing.
recreate it?
That was an interesting part.
He wouldn't talk about that part really that much.
Yeah, it was the very next day when he was being interviewed about. I think Corbell was asking him if he was managed to get anything out of the facility back then. Does he still have it? And then that's when according to the documentary, the next day Bob was raided by the FBI
right.
under some claim of a customer had bought something that was potentially radioactive and brought it across state lines or something. Yeah. He had asked Bob Lazar about the element 115, which was the fuel source for this highly secretive craft. But there was a brief moment where then they were like, oh, wait, we should check first. Do you have your phone on? Shut that off. We'll put it in the ground over here so they can't. But it was too late. And I think the next day, that's when they were raided because they were listening already to Bob. You know, like
that's
actively.
true. That's definitely
if that's true,
creepy,
that
the
is
fact that they can just chime into your phone's microphone at any given point to see what you're doing is if that's even how they did it.
Well, someone like Bob who you're going to be actively listening to.
If they have these kinds of advanced technologies, they don't tell the public, but they could have like a beam pointed directly at you at all times that can grab all your information in conversations no matter what.
That's something beyond just the phone.
Yeah, just beyond the phone, like some sort of ability to just constantly track, or maybe they have a tracking
there's been
system.
technology that's come out and people claiming that they've had messages beamed to them. You know, the crazy tinfoil hat wearers that don't want
apparently
ideas in their heads.
Like the gang stalking thing, that kind of thing.
But for the element 115 that we talked about, that is this highly controversial element.
Stabilized element 115.
Yeah, cool. Element 115, it seemed like during his research at S4, that was the fuel source for the engine. And it wasn't until years later that element 115 became like an acknowledged element, but it was only a synthesized version. And that was the argument. And I have a clip, if you want to play it, John. It's about element 115. This is from the Q&A after the documentary was first shown, but it's specifically about element 115 that's kind of interesting.
Well, the 115 we have, the isotope that powered the craft does not decay. That's a stable element. The element 115 that we synthesized recently, whether it was a few years ago, that does decay very quickly. And any element can have a whole host of isotopes. And those isotopes can have various half-lives or be stable. So the isotope of the 115 that's used in the craft is stable and does not decay.
So that was in response to the question of what the half-life was, what the rate of decay was for element 115. People will say that it's pseudoscience to suggest that you can have a stable version of element 115. And his argument was, well, we've synthesized it and we could never stabilize it, but the version that he analyzed at S4 was a stable version, and that's partly why it's like an alien or extra-dimensional technology.
It's a fuel source, right?
It's a fuel source.
Fuel source for these crafts.
Right, the engines that can warp space-time for the propulsion system. And Jeremy Corbell, the creator of the documentary, had reached out to a multitude, I think 8 or 9 physicists and scientific researchers who study this stuff, and they admitted, well, theoretically, we can't rule it out that you can stabilize element 115. We've just never seen it.
Right.
So, and Chris will get to that later on.
Will I?
Yeah, if we'll let you get to it. The various things that have been verified that Lazar has come out with, right? Isn't that part of
I have a list of things that he's claimed that were either at the facility he was working at or discoveries that they had made that years later are now being validated.
Right, but at the time he was shot down saying he's a hack and a liar, fraud, and now it's coming out that this has been around, but it's just been quiet. But why would the government keep anything secret? That's weird.
On a related note, chicken. Yeah, I thought the other. Yes. Oh my God, it's been so long. Wow,
that laugh. Oh, real quick on that note. Just because of your laugh, remind us, can you please play the clip, Hoagland Giggle?
Computer is reckoning on an all-time high. The future is beckoning onward and onward we fly. New horizons, a dream coming true.
Dude, that was Richard C. Hoagland. Hoagland is hard to listen to when he's interviewed because...
say again who he was.
Yeah, Richard C. Hoagland. He's a prolific author. He was involved at the beginning of the Apollo mission as a news correspondent from, I think, CBS. And he's written a lot of books called, like NASA Dark Mission is one that I have.
He's great if you want to go to bed watching really fun lectures where he's pointing out structures on the moon and Mars that are artificial.
Right.
Either man-made or extraterrestrial made. Yeah. Anyway, that's his giggle apparently.
In interviews, it's always frustrating to listen to him when he's interviewed because every time Clive will say like, it's amazing that this stuff, he's like, it's not amazing, it's obvious. We've had this technology, Clive. Like he just goes over what's
He's very like serious and dramatic about everything.
Yeah, and almost like angry and like just, right. He's like the Richard Dawkins of...
I think it's because in Alien. In a good way, I think it's because he believes so much in what he's saying.
Yeah. So does Clive. It's Clyde,
even if he's
Lewis,
wrong,
isn't it?
Clive? I think it's Clyde. Is it Clyde
or
Clyde?
It's Clyde.
You say Clive all the time.
No, wait. It is Clive.
No, I think it's Clyde.
It's Clive Lewis.
Let's call him up. Let's get Clive on the horn.
Guarantee it's Clive Lewis.
I've heard him say Clyde.
No, you mishear, my friend.
Who names their child Clive?
It's a name.
Apparently Mrs. Lewis.
Like after Clove, the son of Clove.
Cloveson.
Clive Lewis.
Clive, right?
The listeners really want to
In
know.
your face, John.
Clive Lewis, member of...
In your face, brother
this is a
John.
member of Parliament. Hold on.
Oh.
Maybe John's right.
I swear I thought it was Clyde.
Well, somebody actually called up and said his name, and he's like, it's Clyde. Which
It's what?
Well, I mumbled it because I'm not sure what it is.
I was going to say.
It's Clyde.
Anyways, that's not important, but it's a good show.
It is Clyde.
Ha! Oh, wow, okay.
Wow.
Wrong. Well, once in a while I'm wrong.
Mind blown.
Clyde.
Sorry, Clyde.
I wish I had a round of applause sound effect for
You can throw it in later. Yeah, that's a good sound effect.
Anyway, Clyde Lewis, Ground Zero.
I got a door.
Before Coast to Coast.
It's like you're closed out of the conversation. Okay. He also claims that he was given briefing documents, this is Bob Lazar again, given briefing documents describing the historical involvement with Earth for the past 10,000 years. 10,000 years by extraterrestrial beings, the Greys, specifically. Greys, aliens from a planet that orbited the twin binary system. John, how well do you know your alien lore?
Draconis?
Jeremy? No, come on. Alien Greys, where are they from?
Sirius?
Zeta Reticuli
Oh.
is the idea.
I thought it was the Draconians.
They're from the Draco constellation.
Duh. Wow. Womp womp.
Anyway,
Alien fail.
I wish that documentary would have covered that little bit. I want to know, hold on, I want to know what documents he had that described and what events throughout history were extraterrestrials intertwined with.
Right.
Like who did they meet? Did they go meet George Washington?
But this is what's bizarre. I don't buy into the whole extraterrestrial theory, obviously. Like, I think that they're more likely extra-dimensional or come from somewhere else.
That's because you don't believe in space.
I'm skeptical about...
Which is insane.
It's not insane.
It is insane.
To most people listening, it's probably insane.
You don't even trust NASA, but you believe everything else they say.
You don't think that there's space.
Is that
like,
a hologram
flat Earth
above
is
us?
one thing.
Well, okay, first of all, have you been to space? Have you felt space? Why do you believe in space?
Listen to that sound. That's
Yeah,
got to be
where
from
did that come
obviously
from?
from space. Dude, that's so spacey.
They've programmed an idea in your mind about what space
See
is.
what the moon is. That's out of our orbit.
Right. I'm just saying.
And all the things beyond that. I'm just saying, like, what proof have you seen that there is no space?
What proof have you seen that there is, other than from NASA?
I can see with my own visual eyes.
No,
that
you don't
there's
see
things-
space. You see things above you.
What would that be then? Like, so let's say the
It could
moon.
be an ether. It could be
One at a time. Let him finish his question and then answer.
I'm getting riled up.
Ding ding.
I just don't
riled up.
Okay, so fair enough. Like, I understand that. Like, I just don't know. Like, what you think that could be. You think it's like an ocean or something?
It could be an ether, like a watery type substance, which there's actually a lot of interesting evidence that I'd like to touch on about that, which I find fascinating.
I mean, I can only go so far.
Is that where the rain comes from?
Well, I mean,
The sky oceans.
I don't buy in immediately to all the biblical references to this stuff.
Right.
But if you do analyze that, there's a lot of flat Earth Christians out there that believe like
there's a lot,
there's
yeah.
a firmament, and the firmament is basically like what we see that divides the waters from the waters. And the argument is that we have the waters down here, we have the atmosphere. The air is essentially a liquid. It's a fluid. It's a gas.
So all the astronomers that are on the ground right now that can see into
Not in space.
the space ocean or whatever
Yes,
it is.
yes.
Like that's
space
but it's
ocean.
still that exists whatever it
There's
is,
something
right?
up there. I'm not arguing that.
So
I just
do
don't
you think
believe
it's black?
I don't think when they show a Sandra Bullock in the movie Gravity, I don't believe that that's necessarily how space actually
was a
operates.
documentary.
But it's still there.
The theory
I
of
mean,
gravity, I have problems with, and how planets supposedly orbit each other and rotate.
Fair enough.
Like I have issues with all of that.
But
So when
whatever
you say
that
space,
is, so let's call it a black ocean. Like,
yeah,
is
and I don't
it
know how
still the same.
but we don't know
thing?
how deep it goes. We don't know how far away stars really are. Like we have.
That's true. We don't.
And that's what I'm saying. Like it could be space. Space could be an ether, a fluid, or some kind of atmospheric projection, or even a simulation, which I think is very possible we're all in. But it's a description of the simulation. So it could be something miles deep. It could be something, like you would suggest, astronomical. But we don't really know. We have to take.
We should talk to the guy from InfoWars that had a hard time even contemplating the idea that we may have not gone to the moon.
Oh, yeah, he
upset
was
about it.
triggered.
You're like, no, there's no space, dude. There's not even space out there.
Right. He would probably just be like,
Well, I
quit.
That's the good thing about our show is that we can have these contrary ideas of what potentially is going on in our reality. Because I think it's fun to consider that we got to the moon and it rang like a bell, and that there were already ships on the horizon. As they have tapes of astronauts saying things like that. I think it's fun to consider that as a possible reality. It's also fun. It is fun.
Jeremy's
to consider
definitely
that space is some
believer,
sort of
What is interesting, and I'm not even. I have this weird theory that I've never heard anyone suggest before. It kind of is a blend of flat Earth and spatial theory, which is the idea that a lot of supposedly spacewalks you see on the ISS and stuff are actually filmed underwater, which is why you see air bubbles rise up from the astronauts' helmets, which is why
done in slow mo. They
when you're actually on like the moon, for instance, it's slow motion.
They're like running.
Right. But I'm talking about the space station.
Oh, okay.
Where they're supposedly on a spacewalk outside the craft fixing something, and you see air bubbles coming out of their helmet. And actually, someone almost drowned. An astronaut almost drowned. And
in the space ocean?
They said there was a leak in his like cooling system or something like that. And then there's a video where you can see a scuba tank, what looks exactly like a scuba tank, someone who's not supposed to be there, moving from behind a door. And they train for space underwater.
Well, yeah, you would.
But the argument is that a lot of these films are shot underwater.
Right. That would be where you would want to do it if you were faking being in space. Right. That's the idea.
And there's a lot of weird issues with that.
That's a whole other show. But I know you have to. I mean, I understand why you'd want to bring that up because I mean it's hard to go through a whole.
Every time we talk about space,
but Jeremy does believe that though. It seems like you are definitely more on the side that there isn't space
right now.
Flat Earth, sort of.
I'm open to my mind being changed and going back to if I was taken to space and I wasn't just
you weren't just swimming out there.
Well, no, like if someone sold me a ticket right to space and somehow I was put into a ship and it wasn't like they gave me a special pill for the flight and then I was,
oh my God,
presented with LED screens and virtual reality.
You are so far down the route. There's not even, you're in a new rabbit hole dimension.
I just want observable science. And the problem right now is we have to trust everything from NASA. You can't observe space, you can't observe gravity, you can't observe anything, but you trust it all.
I don't trust it all,
but you trust enough to think it's crazy that
Chris is like, let me ask.
I don't want to talk over anybody, and that's all we're doing.
That's
I just
fine.
want to ask a question.
We need a little bit of edge every once in a while.
Oh, I know, but I mean, all I want to ask you is, as you were saying, if I go to space and they don't feed me a pill and they don't have LED screens, how would you know? Because I feel like
no, I agree.
If I buy you a ticket to go onto a shuttle to go into space, and you see that space is the way we've always been told space is, why would you not think? Well, they put something in my food if they served you food, so you couldn't eat, and then you would say, what about the windows? How do I know the windows weren't advanced screens? And I'm just seeing a projection of a 3D fake environment.
First of all, they keep promising these tickets to the moon and Mars and space.
This is a hypothetical. If they did.
Hypothetical. If they did, sure, I would love to do that, and I would try to trust my observations to see how that would work, and I would be completely open to it. Like I totally am, But it's interesting because there was a show on the Sci-Fi that came out recently, and it was about a crew or a certain group of the population that was sent to go to a new Earth, essentially, to populate it because our Earth was dying. And I think there's like 5 or 6 episodes where...
your brain is dying.
Boom. There's like 5 or 6 episodes where these people are on the ship, and they're headed to this new planet, right? And everyone's, they develop a culture on the ship, there's infighting, and eventually someone is ejected from the ship, right? They've decided this person needs to be killed. So they shoot him off into space and they eject him, and he falls out and lands on pillows. Lands on like a big cushioned surface because it turns out that they had tricked everyone on the ship to think that they were going into outer space. In reality, they weren't going anywhere, which is just an interesting suggestion. The mainstream is suggesting this idea that you could be tricked into going to space. Yeah. And I don't think that's that hard of an idea. I know it's an easy cop out.
Basically, there's no way that Jeremy would ever believe that there's anything out there at this point.
Well, he's saying he would try to trust his senses if he was sent up into a rocket. But what I was saying was, how do you know? Like
you would have to actually be in that situation. I can't argue that we may never get there.
I just feel like there was a good chance.
We never have.
Yeah.
But we've never been. There's no one that's ever been.
No individual civilian has had a chance to do that. We talked about that earlier. The tickets that you can buy.
Did we look that up?
The promises made.
So you don't think anyone's been to the outer whatever that is at all?
Freemasons that lie about it.
So you do think people have been into whatever that is?
I don't know, because I do think there's a possibility. Because I've looked at some. And this is what I was trying to get to earlier. My independent theory, where there's a possibility that there is.
Jeremy's. Go ahead.
So people that tend to believe in the flat Earth believe that you can't get there. Right? There's a firmament. You can't get up there. But I kind of have a theory that we may have hit that line. and we may have gotten there because there is interesting evidence that I found independently where there's a famous video from, I think it's from the space station, and it's called the tether footage.
Oh, yeah.
And there's this tether that gets dropped out, and all these things start to swarm around the tether, which we would call UFOs. They're these kind of disc-shaped...
With like a nook cut out.
Yeah, elements with like a little notch in it.
And a hole in the middle.
That are floating around this thing, in and out and zipping around, and it looks like they're floating in water.
It's mind-blowing. We'll put that in the show notes for sure.
They look like living things, is what they look like. And what I found interesting is if you take telescopes, and there are a lot of flat earthers that points at this, is that if you take telescopes and look at the planets and the stars, or maybe not the planets, but the stars, right? They're supposed to be millions of miles away. You zoom in, they have a striking resemblance to these same things that were floating around this tether, as if they are a similar kind of maybe life form living in this kind of ether out there that we
sky mammals.
The water's separated from the firmament. The water's from the waters biblically, like if you want to go that route. But there's a correlation between those things. So I think there's a possibility that we've accessed that ether, that beyond that we call space. But I don't believe necessarily at all that it is as they describe. I don't
a vacuum
of nothingness.
Well, it's interesting.
More like goopy water.
Oh, to answer your question, you were wrong and I was right, as per usual.
No, not per usual.
As per usual.
No, Clyde Lewis, bitch.
You said you would have heard if there was a civilian that went into space.
Oh.
So
it's a multimillionaire?
The world's 5 biggest space agencies have now established health and traveling standards for both astronauts and visitors to the space station, ... The 4th space tourist, tech businesswoman Anashaya Ansari, went up on a Soyuz spacecraft in 2006. That was the 4th person in 2006.
Allegedly.
So, allegedly.
I'd like to see her Instagram feed.
I was saying is it's been reported in the news, and as I was saying before, like,
why
would we catch that headline randomly? Like, we're going to get, it's not going to be all over every page.
I think it's
a
pretty
major
fucking big deal.
Well, did you read the news a lot in
2006?
Yeah.
Wouldn't she be posting images? Why has no one been back since 2006? Why has no one been to the
How do you know
moon?
she hasn't? No, you haven't looked into this. I'm just saying you go off this assumption that no one's been there because I haven't heard it.
Okay, calm
But
down.
obviously it's incorrect.
Don't get so globe-triggered.
Oh my God. But all I'm saying is yes, there's been, as of 2006, there were 4 people.
As of 2006?
There were 4 civilians that had already been into space.
Does that count like people that have been on NASA ships?
Well, it's a space station. They had to get there going.
I guess I was thinking.
This was, I think it says the
so
Soyuz spacecraft.
This is all NASA involved though, right?
Oh, you mean you're talking about like an independent, like something
That's
like
what I'm talking
something
about.
like Elon
like,
Musk's
like some sort of independent
SpaceX.
space. That's I guess where I was coming from.
I don't think SpaceX has not launched anything with people in it yet.
What about the Richard Branson company?
They wanted to
Virgin Mobile.
No,
Virgin Atlantic.
Well, that's not what's taking people to space.
Wasn't that the Dragon?
Virgin something.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But they were talking about it for sure.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, they were kind of doing the same thing. That's what so this is all NASA involved then.
Right.
Yeah, or other other federal space agencies around the country.
CASA, RASA.
Other federal space agencies besides
governmental
NASA? Like
space
the Chinese
like Chinese
space
has a space
agency.
agency, India has a space agency.
That are all, as Richard Hoagland have told us, one global space agency.
Right. Yeah.
But bam.
NASA.
Trust NASA.
Anyway, so tying it back into, so you would say, Jeremy, even if you disagreed that there is space, let's say that's your,
as we know it.
As for right now, that's what you're thinking. You would say then what? That Bob Lazar was seeing interdimensional spacecraft, not necessarily.
Yeah, I would say
extraterrestrial.
That's definitely a possibility.
Does the government have the ships that the government confiscated are interdimensional ships then?
That would be Jeremy's suggestion.
Potentially. Well, and this is an argument too, is Bob even said this when he was talking, was that
Bobby.
In the interview, he said it was bizarre how as soon as he got hired there and was given clearance, suddenly they unloaded all this information on him, right? Like, by the way, these are aliens.
Yeah,
aliens
that
are
was
real.
a little strange.
And then like it almost seems like a little bit of potential, not that he's a disinfo
psyop.
agent, but that they might have used him a little bit to hide the true origins of this technology. Like it could be something like from another civilization or something. We don't know it's from outer space. We don't know it's aliens, but they fed him this immediately. They gave him all this information.
Well, I think it's interesting for that because I think it is possible that they looked at Bob and they said, okay, here's a bright guy, but he's also impulsive. He builds rocket bikes and he likes to have fun. He might not be able to hold on to a secret. He might be impulsive and think like, I want to get this out to the public.
Which he did.
So they have the crafts there, right? And maybe at that point there were already sightings in the skies. This stuff was being seen. So maybe they needed a way to explain it that's not the actual truth. And so they gave him the false information of where these craft were coming from.
That's such a weird mindfuck because what would be the thing that like they wanted to keep from people?
Well, if they just didn't want you to know where they originated. For instance, maybe it's an inner Earth civilization, right? Maybe it's a subterranean civilization.
What is the point of that? Like, I just don't because they want to make sure that
people are on a set belief system of like, this is from outer space. Because that's okay. Like, we've been allowed to think that for so long.
Because then they're really far away. Then they're like light years away. We can never see them get there.
What the point of all that?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's
just an idea.
I get it. I'm just trying to like, what would be this elaborate hoax? What's the point?
Well, you have the disclosure coming out, right? And you have the idea of the alien invasion false flag potential idea, the Project Bluebeam, which may or may not be real.
Right.
But this idea that like get everyone hyped up and everyone thinking they know where these things are coming from and what it really is, and it's an excuse like that famous Ronald Reagan clip that they used at the beginning of a documentary.
What's the purpose of this? The whole thing though, like
So
why would you still need to do that? It's not like anyone has any control over the situation anyways.
Well, the argument would be if it's not even real. Like the idea that like if there's an alien invasion and they hype everyone up for that idea and then they fake that, like a false flag.
But that hasn't happened.
No, not yet. But the slow disclosure building up to that.
Very slow disclosure.
Absolutely. It's getting people more and more,
There has been nothing like
but the idea,
really like
right, but I'm saying the idea is that when this happens and it comes to the critical boiling point where we are all okay with the idea, like not okay with it, we understand that it's coming from outer space, we have to gather together as a planet, as a united world government where everyone can be controlled under a single system because we have a singular outside threat, which is what Ronald Reagan predicted. That's when the globalist agenda is complete, if you believe in the conspiracy theories. So, like, that's the idea.
Yeah.
Like, what better impetus for that to happen?
It's an interesting idea.
But I'm not saying, I'm saying
they're
this
doing
stuff.
that with climate change.
Right, but exactly, it's a lot of different elements. I'm saying this stuff is real. I'm saying that this quote extraterrestrial thing is real. I just don't necessarily believe where they're telling us it's coming from necessarily.
No, I mean, I agree with, especially, from his story. I just don't think it's impossible either that there are other civilizations out there.
Right. I'm not saying that for sure either. They're just coming for this. This is my, my weird mind bent
Jeremy's scientific hypothesis. No, I get what you're saying. I think it's all interesting.
And that's why it's here.
That was
in the belief hole.
A good tangent into Jeremy's space thoughts, and
we will do an episode. I definitely, regardless of flat Earth, I want to do an episode on the faking of the moon landing, the Mars rover issues that they have about how there's a lot of evidence to suggest that they're actually filming that on Earth.
Yeah, because you can believe in space, believe the Earth is round, and still see
believe we just haven't gotten there.
Believe that there's obvious indications that we faked at least the initial moon landings. Like there's plenty of evidence, and that would be a really fun show to do.
And we may be continuing to fake stuff.
Right.
That's the thing too, is when you don't believe the moon landings, but then you decide to believe NASA after the fact for other stuff, and you don't have a skeptical eye. Not that I'm saying that about you, but it just in general.
No, I know, but like there was stuff way before the idea of space and stars, way before we landed on the moon.
Yeah, there was competing.
I mean,
theories.
people used to back in the for sure. I mean, regardless if the truth is that it's whatever it's made out of. Like, there's definitely planets out there, what we would call planets. Like, regular people can see that with telescopes.
Well, we can see stars, but we just we don't know the actual makeup of that. Like, the average person can't verify or validate what that is unless you learn the science that they teach you about.
So these other bodies that we can see, regular people can see out there. Like, you don't think that they are anything as far as what the Earth is. Like, the Earth that you think is flat.
Well, I don't know that the Earth is flat. I just don't think, I really don't know the nature of the Earth. And the argument from the flat Earth community is that there's no way to validate that at this point. It's okay to say, I don't know.
It's okay to say I don't know for sure.
But I mean, the idea that I don't have to prove that the Earth is flat. I'm not trying to say beyond a doubt that the Earth is flat. I'm just saying we should question the science that they're telling us, the things that we've learned that we don't really understand about the nature of space, the nature of these planets supposedly, and getting there. And there are things to suggest that we don't live on a sphere. We don't live on a spinning sphere in space. Like the complete absence of a measurable curve is a problem. Like if you look at just the ability to observe your surroundings and measure it scientifically, we can't do that. And that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think this is a conversation, obviously, because I feel like if we keep going down this hole, we're going to start asking you for specific examples, and we're going to get into that.
This will be another episode.
Yeah, let's save it up.
Let's take a break, and then we can kind of wrap up the Bob Lazar stuff.
Bob Lizzie.
Let's take a break, and we'll be back.
See you soon.
Welcome, everybody. We are back for Section 3.
Section.
Sex.
We're so organized.
Is it section 3? Oh yeah, I guess that was break 2.
Section.
So there's math again.
Sex. S-E-X.
This is getting
I-O-N.
It's becoming a nasty episode, John.
Section.
Okay. We're children. Welcome back to the
Sexy
show.
on 3.
Yeah, so I thought we could kind of get back into the wrap up the Bob Lazar stuff. I think he deserves some wrapping.
Yes.
So I think we should. I want to mention the few things that is pointed out in the documentary too. A few of the things that Bob had said that had come to fruition, and that I think are things that you can point to be like, okay, well, there's some redemption there.
Verify his story.
Yeah, where people were calling him crazy when he was saying things like, well, I think one good example, and not to get back into the flat Earth stuff, and I know you can put in a little asterisk that you don't necessarily agree with this, but in 2016 we had that experiment where the gravity waves the gravity is in fact a wave. We
You're
measured
flat
a
Earth
gravity
triggering
wave.
me right now.
I know. I'm sorry. Just hold your horsies, hold your flat Earth horsies for a second. So Bob Lazar talked about gravity being a wave, and that was how the propulsion system worked on these crafts. And in 2016, we had the first experiment to allegedly conclude that it had picked up a gravity wave.
Right.
I think from an interstellar source. So, but that sounded just like that. And so the idea is that, Bob kind of called it. Like, it just goes to more validation of his claim of it being involving gravity waves, specifically gravity waves.
Right. Well, that wasn't a Bob Lazar theory. Right, that was a theory that existed, and Bob Lazar picked up on. Einstein had the theory of gravity.
It was from Einstein. What I'm saying is Bob Lazar said that's how these craft operate.
Right, that was his explanation. He said that we don't understand it, but this was his best explanation of how it's working.
Right.
And that word gravity, there's an argument to be made that you can swap out electromagnetism, right? That force field he was talking about, where he said it felt like magnets pushing back off each other. There's an argument to be made that is the... But he has a tie to the idea of gravity. I mean, he's a huge Einstein fan. He wore that Einstein shirt in the documentary.
I'm not trying to debate gravity right now. I just wanted to go through the validations of...
I'm going to put an asterisk on that validation.
I know, I said you
just
had an
because
asterisk.
I don't think that gravitational experiment... We covered this in a previous episode. I know. Let me explain it. In a previous episode, if you heard that episode, the gravitational wave experiment was non-verifiable. There was a simulation where they did a false positive and they discovered it, right? False positive. They discovered it, and then they're like, "Oh, that was we gave you guys an example of what it would be like, and we tricked you into thinking it was real. And then now let's wait and see if it happens." And then it happens shortly after. There's a lot of suspicion in that argument. No, I don't think it was that much later. Regardless,
let's
move on to the next
We talked about it in the
one.
Belief Hole. We hold contradictory ideas in the same space, and we like to look at all angles. So I'm just talking about validations.
The hole is deep.
Yes. So anyway, continuing on. Jeremy, may I continue?
You could always continue.
Thank you.
I thought one of the most interesting things he discussed was the hand scanner. That security clearance thing. So when he said when he worked at S4, there was this, and this was in '89 or whatever, or pre-'89. There were hand scanners.
I guess that was a long ass time ago.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
well before this technology existed. And he said how it worked was specifically interesting because it used light to read the structure of your bones underneath your hand to get a specific skeletal imprint. I'm pretty sure that's what he was explaining.
And what was it used for?
When he would go to S4, right?
Yeah, when he would go to this classified facility, there were certain
technologies to verify his identity.
Right, to make sure you could get in. It was you, the person
like a key card. For
right,
the
like you
next
see in like
level.
old Get Smart episodes. Where
And this was 1989, right? So this was before
pre-1989.
iPhones and computers and all sorts of stuff.
Before we had personal computing systems, really.
Right.
And but he was explaining this hand scanner, and it was the system where it was light based, where it would read through your skin and it would read the structure of your bone using I'm assuming light optics to read the structures of your skeleton, just validating that this is Bob Lazar, rocket scientist at S4, and because his bones are this sort of imprint of his bones tells this is him.
And so this was his claim when he first came out, when he was explaining all this stuff, and he was saying this is part of the technology that used to verify.
Right,
me.
it was one of these,
and people called him crazy for this, right?
Yeah.
Like you're lying because that technology doesn't exist.
Right, exactly.
But UFOs do for some reason. But
right.
Yeah, so but then finish the rest of the story.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, years and years and years later, we now have at Ellis Air Force Base in Nevada, so very nearby where Bob was working, they have more modern versions of the same technology where it's using light to read through your skin, to read the skeletal structure, to say this is the skeletal, basically fingerprint of who this person is.
It's something like the length of your index finger from knuckle to point, or something like that, where it's distinct for every individual.
But that's not what actually redeemed him, though.
That was one of, I'm just listing a few different things that made it, this pointed to.
No, but the whole point of that was that the documentary maker found pictures of the original units.
Right. Those weren't the original ones.
Well, but
they're the same technology they have now.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to.
Yeah, they have the technology now.
He was showing the pictures he was
showing. I thought you were saying stuff that we have now.
Well, the pictures he was showing were the hand scanners that were used years later at Nellis nearby S4 that worked the same way. And that's why
misinterpreted.
That's
what
why
you
if
said.
you watch Jeremy Corbell's documentary on Bob Lazar, Bob is shown the photograph of this technology. He goes, "I can't believe you found a picture of this."
Right,
Yeah, this is. And he's like, "Where did you get this?" He's like, "Oh, these are at Nellis, right down the road from S4." And he's like, "Well, that's what I was describing."
Right.
So a validation on something that he had spoken about. Another interesting validation, and they mentioned this in the movie, there was that guy with the weird last name. I can't think of what it was, Pinker Belly or something. The guy who was in charge of doing the background check on Bob Lazar for the security firm that was hired by S4 to go through the background of these people they were hiring. It was part of a hiring firm.
Like interview them.
A security hiring firm, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And he remembered the guy's name.
Was it like Think Ted or something like that?
It was Thinky Payne. I don't know.
Thinky Payne.
By the way, that's
it was
comedy
Think
special.
something.
Think or Pink or something. I should have written that down, but I didn't. But anyway, watch the documentary. It's great. But yeah, the concept was they later discovered that not only did this person exist, but he worked at that facility. I forget the acronym for it. Was like EGS or something. That was in charge of hiring.
EGG or something like that?
That was in charge of hiring for secure facilities and doing these background checks. And with a guy with such a strange name, for Bob to make up a random name like that.
Right,
and
so
then
it further validates his claim of actually working there.
Right, and then according to Jeremy Corbell, if you believe the documentary filmmaker, he said he spoke to this gentleman and the guy acknowledged, yes, I did, in fact, do Bob Lazar's security clearance. And I remembered because after Bob came out, he's like, I did that guy's security clearance. He didn't want to come on the documentary because he didn't want to tarnish his record of secrecy for over 30, 40 years or whatever. But so you got to take that or leave it. Do you believe Jeremy or not? To me, it makes total sense because I think George Knapp even said that he at least found that there was that guy. Anyway, interesting.
Right.
And then the last thing I had written down was just, which we've already gone over and over, but element 115, which Bob Lazar was discussing, was discovered or synthesized in 2003, but Bob was discussing it in 89. So just another...
So it was finally released to the public in 2003 as an official element, but at the time, Bob had come out with it. Bob came out with it and said we synthesized a version of the original stable element that they used as a fuel source, and we synthesized it, and then later, now they can reproduce the synthesized element, and it's out in the open, but I don't think they attribute it to...
Oh, no.
Bob Lazar, obviously.
No, yeah, no.
And S4.
No.
Yeah, so, but I think Bob Lazar is an interesting case, and I still, I would say that I am like 96% on board that Bob Lazar is 100%.
Number.
Yeah, I think there are some things to, I don't know, because I was reading some detractor statements, like from Stanton Friedman. Do you know who he is, John?
Mm-mm.
Stanton Friedman is like,
Is it like Snopes?
No. He's a ufologist. He's arguably one of the most
famous ufologists.
If you've seen him in documentaries before, he was like in the
Snopes
90s.
Of ufologists?
No. He's not a skeptic. Generally,
no.
Okay.
He's.
What did he say though?
Let me explain who he is real quick because this is significant.
Okay.
So without Stanton Friedman, we would not have the Roswell crash in popular culture. Like after the Roswell crash happened, and was it 47? Whatever year it was, the government released the
same year John Denver was born.
Yeah, the
irrelevant.
Well, he's an alien. That's my
okay.
theory.
Let's get back to that later. That's a whole episode.
He's the perfect human.
He's a perfect human.
Homegrown tomatoes.
Yes, man. Country Roads, man.
Heartwarming.
He was talking about the Kuiper Belt when he was singing about Country Roads. So the reason why we have the Roswell crash in popular culture today. So, like I was saying, the Daily Record in Roswell released a report from the Air Force Base saying we've recovered a flying disc from an. Oh God.
What is happening, John?
It's having a space orgasm over there.
Laser sounds.
Yeah. So
so off-putting.
All right, I'm sorry. Go ahead, finish your point.
So
Stan Friedman.
Yes, I know. Okay, so what I was just trying to get to was at that time in 1947 they released that thing that made worldwide news. We've recovered a flying disc from an alien civilization. And then the next day, and that's a whole other episode, the next day they came out saying, oh, we were wrong, it's a weather balloon. A lot of holes in their official statement. 2 days after they released the second newspaper story saying it's just a weather balloon, the country bought it for 30 years. No one talked about Roswell being a thing. It was a weather balloon incident. There were no conspiracy theorists talking about it being an actual thing. Everybody believed the government because at that time, everyone believed the government. It wasn't until the 70s,
the 40s and 50s.
when this guy, Stanton Friedman, came out and did this whole research story on it and wrote books about it. Then everybody was like, oh, wait a minute, maybe there's more to Roswell. And that's why without Stanton Friedman, we as the generation we grew up in probably would have never even heard about Roswell.
Okay.
That's all I was trying to say. And so Stanton Friedman, this big guy, big ufologist, you'd recognize him if you saw him, heavy guy with a mustache.
And a physicist, right?
He's a
nuclear physicist.
Retired nuclear physicist and professional ufologist who was the original civilian investigator of the Roswell incident. He was able to verify that Lazar took electronic courses in the late 1970s at Pierce Junior College in Los Angeles. At the same time, he was supposedly attending MIT in Massachusetts. So, I mean, you can argue that those were fudged records. Obviously, that's something we could argue. He further determined that Lazar had graduated from high school in the bottom third of his class and that the only science course he took was chemistry. He believes that this would almost certainly have excluded Lazar from MIT, as MIT usually only takes from the top percentiles. Friedman believes that Lazar lied about attending MIT and Caltech. No professors remember Lazar. He was not in any yearbooks. He was also not a member of any professional bodies. And this is, of course, from Wikipedia. But what I think what's funny to me about this is the next statement here. MIT has confirmed that there is no way to expunge someone from their records. What? You're saying that the government can't, the school can't expunge somebody from their records. They can't delete
physically
computer files.
impossible.
They can't burn written records. Like how do you?
It's
how are
written
you
in
not,
stone.
Yeah. Come on.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
I feel like all of these arguments are very
He was
circumstantial.
graduated,
right?
Like, yeah, I mean, the dude is obviously brilliant, though. That's the thing.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
like when
we
you say,
didn't- yeah.
if he graduated at the bottom third of his high school, but they have recruiters, and if we're talking about advanced technology programs, you know how, like, I guess we could talk about Corey Goode and how there's certain ways to like figure out who's interested in these like
Right.
higher concepts. If he's like at home deconstructing,
Well, yeah,
like,
we didn't even touch on that with Bob Lazar, but he was a garage physicist,
Jet
right?
propulsionist.
He built all kinds of like rocket bicycles, and he even said that like they seemed more interested in what he did outside of his professional work.
Right. He had a particle accelerator in his master bedroom.
yeah, so like I'm sure that they have, if the government really does work the way they work and they have these, they've been on an advanced track for, decades and decades, like they have ways of figuring out like this guy's building rockets and he's like 12 years old or whatever.
Yeah,
like
that's going to be relevant.
Yeah, they're going to not care about as much about what grade you got in chemistry.
Exactly. In either way, like I think is why this argument doesn't really hold up is because, I mean, if you believe any of this stuff from whistleblowers who work in the government, they most definitely have ways to just remove you from records from universities and workplaces. Like that's such a weak argument to say, especially when I wish we had that clip, but George Knapp did a great news piece even back when Bob first came out, because people he had his detractors then saying he never went to the school, yada yada. But George Knapp had an investigative piece where it showed that Bob Lazar was in a newspaper printed where it was discussing his work experience at Los Alamos Air Force Base. They found a yearbook picture at him I don't remember if it was MIT or another university where they claimed he was never on record. He was in the phone book at Los Alamos as to me, that argument just doesn't hold up. Well, he's not recorded in the records. Well, anymore.
But if you actually do the research like George Knapp did, you can actually find his name registered in the directory
you find
for
the
Los
breadcrumbs.
Alamos research facility.
Well, that's nuts that there was actually like, I can't remember what directory they found him in. What
it was Los Alamos.
It was employee directory.
Research directory.
Yeah.
It was Robert Lazar right there next to everyone else.
Stan Freeman did have his argument against that specific thing was that
it was a doctor.
That Los Alamos also lists contractors, and that Bob Lazar worked for a company that contracted with Los Alamos. So that was the argument for that.
And they just mixed all the names together?
Yeah, I don't know.
Seems weird.
It seems very unorganized.
Maybe if he was a contractor that worked, I mean, you could be a contractor and still work at the facility,
Right. I think what it really comes down to for me is watching Bob, listening to Bob, and does it seem like he's being genuine?
Well, and his life was completely ruined by all this
which
stuff.
is why
Unless
he's gone
he didn't think
silent.
that was going to happen. I think this is a good clip regardless. This is what, what's his name? Jeremy Corbell?
Yeah, Corbell.
Corbell, he's asking him now that all this has happened, like what is the takeaway from all this experience you had?
The big thing is the suppression of extremely advanced technology and the suppression of unknown science. That's it. Those two things, to me, is the only thing that's important about what was going on out there. Yeah, there's another civilization, and like I've said before, that's a crime not to tell humanity about that, but that's a separate thing. There's another civilization in existence that's intelligent that we know about, and we actually have artifacts from them that can operate. So I mean, that's a big, big deal. But in my mind, there's a lot to deal with that. However, the science and the technology can change us dramatically. It can change the way the entire world operates, the economy, everything. So those stick out in my mind as being critically important.
Yeah, so talk about disruptive technology. We talk all the time about the suppression of technology because of how it would affect the people who have all the power and all the money.
Mm-hmm.
Because we run off these antiquated systems of energy, yada,
Even
yada.
if we move to all these other green forms, that's still an industry that controls, like you're not allowed to store your own solar energy that you, you have to sell it back. It's all about control of energy.
Yeah.
There's dangers to that too when you think about it, because if everyone has access to unlimited energy, then you can start building
destroy the planet,
weapons and stuff like that. But if there was a way to build governors on these things and people just didn't need power grids anymore and they didn't need companies to sell them, it would eliminate a lot of jobs, but it also open up if you had unlimited energy for each person and you could do whatever you wanted with it, you wouldn't really need careers anymore.
No.
Like it would just self-fulfill, like food, everything eventually would just start to, there wouldn't be a need for the amount of labor that goes into
Absolutely. It could survive without the necessity of having a governing body.
Right, and that removes power from the top.
Those that wish to control
people. Yeah, so, I mean, I think that's what it comes down to, and I think that's a great reason when people ask, there are plenty of theories you can give when someone says like, well, if the government knew about aliens or whatever, or advanced technology, why wouldn't they just give it to us? Well, it just goes to...
You obviously don't know the basics of conspiracy theories or anything like that.
I mean, it just goes to the whole power thing. Like, people need people below them.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't have to do anything.
And that's not even touching along some of the theories that I have about like what's...
or like
if
dark
we are
forces
more like... Well, even they don't even have to be necessarily what we consider dark forces, but we use animals for all sorts of things,
right?
And I don't think we consider ourselves dark forces but that we use them for food, and
animal husbandry.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like we are using them
power source
for all sorts of things, and like maybe there's civilizations that are using us for whatever.
Oh yeah, I mean, like who knows? I mean, I think it's crazy fun to think about. I mean,
like the energetic reptilians that are feeding
not fun if it's true.
That could be one layer, but maybe there's more that we don't
David
understand.
Icke layer.
Maybe we're mining and doing all sorts of things for them, that we're building technology. Like,
or maybe we're entertainment. Maybe there are people that are just playing our avatars. Maybe we're all just avatars for,
John, go to the bathroom right now.
Why do I have to pee all of a sudden?
Here I go. Yeah, I mean, you extrapolate all this out, and despite the shape of the planet or the technologies we're building within this potential simulation, right? Like the idea that like...
So are there 3 aliens right now that are all wanting to make a podcast out of humans?
Yeah.
And they're just feeding off of this?
Maybe not even aliens, but just a different level of consciousness. Like, you ever see the movie 13th Floor?
They like sit down in front of their video screen and they're like, now go make a podcast.
Yeah.
It's like Sims, like we're an avatar. And
they're trying to get people awake so that like they actually feel bad for the avatars, and they're like, well, let's make some characters.
Let's wake up some avatars.
That's freaky.
There's
I was talking about simulation theory and saying that we, like the Matrix, the idea that like it might not just be psychic overlords that are feeding off of our direct energy in this realm, but it could be that very similar to the concept of the Matrix, where we are plugged in and we are living this simulation to occupy ourselves.
We've already built the AI that's feeding off of us. We just don't know it.
Yeah, either we've built it or it existed before, and we are creations within this simulation, and whatever it is feeds off of or enjoys the different experiences we go through, like the psychic entities. Like it might not be, we've created a 3D extrapolation of this simulation experience with video games and virtual reality, but in the next dimension above us, if there is one, they potentially could be harvesting in a whole different way that we can't even perceive. But then you get these experiences that David Icke talks about, the energetic reptilians and all these things where they exist outside of us and they control us and they feed off of the fear and the adrenochrome.
Start to get the feeling as time is progressing more and more that all these possibilities are possible.
Yeah. And like they all probably exist at the same time.
Yeah, that's the weird thing is like,
it would in a simulation.
The further we get into the future and as technology grows and ideas grow and the weirdness of the world grows, it's just like there's just shit going on that's overlapping that maybe there's just so much life right now and it's all just sort of playing out in this grand scheme of things.
Right.
Yeah. That's sort of how it feels to me. It feels like all these possibilities are potentially real and they're overlapping.
Right. That's why it's a belief. It's not a belief map. It's a belief hole. Because everything is just TM. Everything is thrown into it. Now we're getting meta.
It never ends.
I guess we did pick a good name, even though it sounded weird to a lot of people.
But it's all
belief hole. Do you watch that thing?
It's all mixed around. I feel, a lot of times I do. The more we get into this stuff and the more it ties together, I just feel like we're in this like hole, this puddle where it's getting swished around.
Right. And everything kind of bumps into each other in this viscous.
And it's all real.
Minutia.
And Bigfoot does matter. Because it's just another symptom of this like extrapolated
and
reality.
This one story of Bob Lazar is telling the truth, that could be just one tiny little fragment of the insane truth that actually exists.
And that's why when Mother asks us, aren't you going to run out of things to talk about on your crazy show? You just talk about crazy stuff? I was like, Mom.
Does Dr. Phil run out of things to talk about, Mom?
Life is crazy. There's so many of these things. Like, it is like the more we dig, the more we find out that this belief hole is bottomless. And it does all.
There's been like 70 billion people that have lived on this planet. You think we're going to run out of things to talk about? Like all the weird shit
right,
that's
it's endless.
on?
And it goes in every direction through time, future, past.
Yeah.
Right.
Parallel.
We should have Dad on the show, and you should tell him about space not being real and the
what do you
flat
think?
Earth. I just would like to see his reaction because he'd be like, "Oh,
well, he's such like a sweet guy, and he doesn't want to get like."
But he's pretty much locked as you can be in the Matrix.
But it would be interesting to like put him in a chair where he can't get out with headphones on and a microphone in front of him, and have to respond to these questions because it probably would end up him being like, "Oh, well, maybe," it would probably end up with him being like,
"No, it wouldn't."
I think he'd be like,
I think he has an impenetrable barrier of goo that lives on his brain.
But when
surface.
it hits that, he
it's
just
scar tissue.
When it hits that, he just like lovingly giggles.
Yeah, no, he doesn't like take it personally. Or
he's
anything,
the
but
sweetest
he's
guy.
totally like. I think there's no going back for him.
For Daddy-O, it's got to come from It's got to come from a source in the newspaper that he trusts or TV that he trusts.
It's got to come from Bryant Gumbel.
If he saw something on like a morning news talk show about, did you see that Bob Lazar came out and he's telling the truth about
that's true. Then it would work.
He's come
so
to me
conditioned to have it come from the television.
He's come to me before, like years after, and been like the other day. He was like, "Did you see the documentary that just came out about? It's called Above Majestic. I guess there was this thing called Project Blue Book back in like that." I was like, "Yes, Dad, I learned about that when I was 8.
Yeah.
And you didn't believe me then, but you saw it on it was advertising USA Today
now
as a new documentary
it to you.
Katie Couric told you, and all of a sudden it's reality.
But I love Dad. I don't want to make it sound like Dad. He's the best dad in the world.
Well, when we were researching this episode, and I told Dad about the documentary, he was kind of like looking at me and kind of like looking away, like, okay. And then I said, and it's like a real documentary that's just come out. This guy's been validated, and they've done a movie on it. And he goes, "Oh,
a movie?
A movie?"
He's like, "Oh, it's on film."
Yeah, well, yeah. Once it comes, but that's the thing. Like, it's the same with like
that was that generation.
Well, you got to think when he grew up.
Well, it's
news
also,
was news then. It was just reporting facts.
Well, he thinks the way we watch the internet and like, how do you know that any of that's
right?
Real?
Exactly.
Like, but
what's the thing? That's the argument too. I hear all the time is like, oh, you go to YouTube University, like you get all your information there. Yeah, well, at least like I can see that these people are just real people. I get that they don't have the backing,
and you can connect dots, and they can go in long dives of information.
And they're not sponsored by General Electric funding the wars overseas,
pharmaceutical companies, all the power structures in place.
Yeah,
right
when
now.
you watch some random guy talking on YouTube, you understand you can hear what he's saying, you can take it with a grain of salt, and you can see the authenticity,
his genuineness, what he's talking about. You don't just believe everything that everyone says. That's obvious, but especially over time, you get like someone like David Icke or some of these researchers that have been doing it their whole lives.
And they live in like duplexes somewhere.
They've been doing it their whole life. This is all they studied. They've been looking for this stuff their whole life, and like they have video after video after video of explaining why they think that the way they do.
Right.
Like that's way more credible and understandable to me than a 5-minute news clip that was produced and edited
and it falls in line with a narrative.
Yeah,
in between like pizza pockets and
pocket,
whatever, like
and douche commercials.
Are there those? Is that a thing? Douche. I don't think that's a thing.
They're out there.
Vagina cleanses.
Douche commercials.
Yeah, they're there. Can't keep your legs shut.
Put it in your front butt. That's not a commercial.
It was an SNL bit.
Your
It's good.
front butt?
Put it in your front butt. It was an SNL bit with, I forget the
I
guy's
don't even, what does that mean, front butt?
vagina. Can't keep your leg shut. I think we were selling diaphragms. Like
like
birth control.
contraceptives.
Your front
Can't keep your
butt.
leg shut. Put it in your front butt. That is not a believable joke. That is from SNL. It was
pretty
years
funny.
ago. It was a good one.
Yeah. But that's the idea is that like if it, and I was mentioning that earlier too, like if you're a comedian, for instance, there's a lot of times where your family and your wife or your spouse won't find you funny because they're too close to you. You know, that's another thing when you're trying to give this info. You're trying to give this.
Oh, that's totally true. Yeah.
It's just my son who's talking. He's nuts.
That's the
Yeah.
If he had a tie and he had a TV prompt in front of him where he was reading the words off that he was saying.
If someone wrote it for him and was verified and came from a credit card company, I'd believe him. But
And a good dental plan.
And a good dental
Well,
plan.
even with us, like I feel like if I had talked to you about the flat Earth, and I know like we can have open conversations about stuff.
I think
but,
I probably believe you more than other people.
Well, I'm saying, let's say like Owen Benjamin or someone that you follow, like is like there's some interesting things I'm going to
He's
show
pretty good
you.
at breaking stuff down, though.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We never
You're
really.
not.
Well, we don't really get to talk about it.
I'm joking.
And he's not
The
your
moon-
brother.
Well,
He's not your little
I
brother.
feel like I've asked you about the moon stuff. Like I'd never have, and maybe it's partly too because I'm watching it and it's like broken down
Yeah,
for
exactly.
me on the screen.
It's presented to you.
And yeah, there are times when you talk to me and my eyes sort of glaze over.
Yes, I see your eyes glaze all the time.
Yeah, no, it's hard to pay attention to you guys.
Yeah, he's too busy with the sound effects.
I have overcome a lot of it. I'm doing a goddamn podcast with you at this point. I've had to learn how to pay attention to some degree.
Well, we thank you for that.
Yeah,
appreciate
You're
it.
doing very good.
Let's wrap up the Bob Lazar stuff. We're kind of getting off.
Yeah, is there
topic
anything else you
here.
want to touch on with Bob Lazar?
I think we covered everything. Like I said before, I think it all comes down to you have to watch him. You have to see you have to feel what you feel when you're watching and when you're listening to him.
I have one more short clip if you want to play it. It's like 10 seconds. It just goes to Bob Lazar's character. It's in the so the Q&A. He was super uncomfortable because he doesn't. Oh, there's one thing I want to mention. Bob Lazar. This documentary came out. He didn't want to do it. He was convinced to do it, and he didn't accept any money from the documentary. He donated it all to like some scientific like education organization. And so, but this short clip is
Seems
just
fairly well off.
I think, well,
That's 'cause he's an engineer.
He's been a practicing scientist since he was a child. He's been building rocket engines for his bicycle.
he doesn't
and
need
his
to lie for
cars.
money.
Right. So anyway, so this clip is it's really short. It's just basically him responding to the awkwardness of being in front of people.
I don't know. It's just you're kind of done, or I don't know. You talk for yourself, man. You're uncomfortable. Admit it.
Yeah, no, I have social anxiety, so this is like, this is horrific to me.
You are courageous! Bob, you are courageous. Courageous.
Hey guys, give Bob Lazar a hand.
That was basically just him. You get a little glimpse of him being like socially awkward, not accepting the praise, and not being comfortable in front of groups of people, and doesn't want any acclaim from him speaking out. He
Okay.
just wants to get the information. So that was kind of a clip attesting to that character.
Oh, good clip, Jeremy.
Thanks.
I was going to say what I thought was an important clip, and we don't have it, but where he was saying, yes, it's important that this technology exists. They're keeping it from us. That's very important, but that's not the reason I'm coming out about it. I'm coming out because I'm afraid, and it's an
Right.
insurance policy. If I don't say anything, they know that I'm a risk because of my activity, and So
Right.
I don't want to get killed, and I feel like if I come out and I tell the story, there's less chance they do it, because then if they do it, then it gives credence to what I'm saying.
Right, and then George Knapp goes on to say, well, but you are concerned about humanity knowing this stuff. And he said at the time, this was an earlier clip from the 90s or late 80s. And he said, honestly, no. The honest answer is I'm just scared. And me talking about it is the best way to ensure that my family will be safe.
Right. He said it was important, but not enough for him to come out and talk about
He's
it.
probably realized later as he's gotten older, like it's already out now.
Now he's safe.
Now he can actually realize the importance for humanity.
Yeah.
He's not immediately worried about his life, which is usually takes precedent almost over anything unless you're some sort
Right.
of hero.
So to wrap it up, guys, check it out. Bob Lazar and Flying Saucers by Jeremy Corbell.
Area 51.
Area 51.
Bob Lazar, Area 51.
Another
and
good
Flying
documentary
Saucers.
if you want to learn about Area 51 is Independence Day with Will Smith.
Yes.
So we're really well done.
Very realistic.
Special effects a little over the top, but it's a great documentary.
Guys, go to
Belieful.com.
Belieful.com. Give us a like. Subscribe to our show in all platforms.
Share it with your friends.
Give us money. No, just kidding.
Oh, yeah. If you can,
But
if you can share
want
with
to,
your friends and just say, hey, these guys talk about it, some interesting stuff, and they're fun.
even if they're not into conspiracies, they might like it.
Give them love because they need it. Because we want to
If they
keep.
like to laugh, they might enjoy it.
We want to keep doing the show, and we want to hear from you guys. We love everyone that's written in so far. Kimberly, thank you. Everyone who's been a patron.
We'll make you a stinger.
We'll make you stingers.
Yeah.
We we
We'll
really
sing a
this
song
really
for you.
is this. We'll sing songs. We really we're not
We'll sing
monkeys.
songs.
We're not dancing monkeys or elves.
Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun.
But we do it because we really care that you guys care.
Yeah.
And we want to keep this going for you guys, and we want to do it for ourselves. This is what we're passionate about. So reach out, support us, spread the word.
Yeah, we love you guys. Thank you to the new patrons that we mentioned earlier. And we hope you enjoyed your stingers. We love you.
And there'll be more Patreon episodes coming out soon. We tried to release one this last month, and we had some technical difficulties.
But it's recorded and ready to go.
The more patrons we get, the more time we can spend doing this full time, and we'll put out more content and more Patreon episodes, and it'll just be a self-fulfilling cycle.
Yes.
Exactly.
And we mentioned the merch store last month, hoping we get it up. We did not get it up in time, but we're still working on it. Don't worry, we will have stuff out.
Don't worry.
It'll be up in January for sure.
Yeah.
I just promised it.
So thank you guys for tuning in.
Jeremy the Promiser.
Jeremy the Promiser is promising.
All right, guys. Well, you have a good beginning to your new year.
Absolutely.
And Godspeed.
Yes. Go with grace and light.
Weird.
Kisses.
All right. Talk to you later.
Bye.